discussed earlier. You always want to be the guy who can, be fighting from ahead rather than fighting from behind. But I think there's a clear strategy here. I think Arizona hasn't been called because Arizona shouldn't be called because there still are a lot of votes out there, and people don't really know what's going to happen in Arizona. None of the Biden people feel confident, but you know what? The Trump people felt confident in Wisconsin last night, and then when Milwaukee County came, all of a sudden they were behind. I think it's close enough for Wisconsin for it to be appropriate to ask for a recount, and they have. And as far as the lawsuit in Michigan, I think it's appropriate to say we want to be able to watch these votes being counted, and apparently Michigan law allows for that. And so you, of course, would want the votes to stop being counted until the court rules. And if the court rules in your favor, then you go in and appropriately watch those votes being counted. And the same thing should apply in Pennsylvania. So, these are all things I think are very reasonable things for the president's campaign to do. What the result will be, who knows? But what we know is that we're not asking, I don't want people to misunderstand. The president's not saying through these lawsuits, don't count any more votes, leave it where it is. What he's saying is, if you want to, we don't want any more votes counted until there is representatives there watching to make sure the count is on the up and up. And I think that would be something that the Biden campaign, if they're being reasonable, wouldn't disagree about.
Okay, we're going to see a lot more income.
And I think that would be something that the Biden campaign would wouldn't disagree about.
We're going to see a lot more
We're taking a live look at the Capitol now as we continue this count in this 2020 election. We just heard a few minutes ago from former Vice President Joe Biden explicitly saying he is not declaring victory, but he says when the votes are counted, we, meaning him and his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, think that they will show that we won the United States.
That is the position of the Biden campaign, is that he in contrast to Donald Trump, is not suing anybody to stop the count. He said when the count is completed, as they're taking it, he will win, as you say. And that is the map right now. It's not done. It's not over.
received ballots that were mailed on election day, but received up till as late as this Friday. And that's been a point of contention. The Trump campaign is jumping into that fight, trying to exclude any of those votes which they presume to be for Joe Biden. But that only really matters if the initial count that includes things that votes that were received up to election day favors Joe Biden, or favors President Trump in a way that the other votes could make a difference. So, in other words, if Joe Biden is winning anyway, the additional votes would probably just be gravy to add to that pile. So it doesn't seem to me, and I could be wrong about this, Tara, you're the legal expert, not me, but it doesn't seem to me like they're doing anything that would substantially change the vote count itself. The votes are going to be the votes, and barring some kind of a catastrophe or new revelation that which has not been presented, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to change the numbers.
And Rick, even these ballots that have been called into question, not specific ballots, but the general idea of them, the question isn't whether or not they should be counting ballots that were cast after the deadline on election day. They were cast before that. It's just a matter of when they were received. Can you explain that nuance?
Yeah, sure. Look, states have different laws around these things. There are some states where you have to send in your absentee ballot, your early vote, and have it received by election day. There's others that say, well, as long as you send it in or have it posted by election day, you receive it up to the Pennsylvania has never really had much of a history of early voting in the past. They changed their laws. They loosened it for COVID-19. And one of the things that lawmakers tried to do was to change that deadline, to let people send in a vote as late as election day and be received a few days later. And that's where the court fight began. The state Supreme Court ultimately allowed the late counting, and the Supreme Court, a deadlocked court before the Supreme Court, before Amy Coney Barrett was on the court, said that that would be okay. But there was a warning attached to that. This was reported on, and Terry's reported on extensively, that they may revisit that. And so it's possible it goes back before the court, but it's not clear at this stage how many votes we're talking about here, whether they have the capacity to turn the election. We've got to think about things in the context of that very close recount in Florida in 2000, but unless you have that tight margin like that, it's hard to see any of these very narrow issues becoming relevant.
Well, let me ask you, Rick, if things continue along these lines, as Vice President Biden thinks they will, can you see Donald Trump conceding that he lost?
It's hard for me to imagine those words escaping his lips. And he has spent so much of the last 4 years alleging fraud and various plots by Democrats. And I feel like his Twitter feed will continue to spread that sort of misleading information up to the day he deletes it or the day he dies. So I can't imagine him saying, you know what, the guy beat me and let's move on. I could imagine a scenario where he says, I think I should have won, I think I would have won, and I don't love it, but ultimately a peaceful transition of power. But I think these next 48 hours are critical because those initial final vote counts, what do the numbers show in Nevada? What do they show in Arizona? What do they show when we're finalizing Michigan, as we are now in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina? If, when the dust settles from all of that, there is a viable path and a plausible legal argument to make the challenge that could overturn it, then I could see an active flurry of court fights in multiple state capitals, Florida on steroids. If, on the other hand, it appears that President Trump has lost enough states that he's losing pretty badly, I just don't see it. I don't see how you keep up a fight like that unless you've got the facts on your side.
And Rick, we're coming up on almost 24 hours now since the first polls closed and those votes started being counted. As we head into evening now, what do you make of what we've seen so far in this count? And what do you think we should expect going into tonight?
Yeah, that's kind of jarring for you to say, because I haven't slept in the last 24 hours.
Neither has Terry, and I've gotten a very small amount. So what about you?
It's very strange to think about this very long game that we've been in. But it's a little wild series of events. I mean, to have those initial returns come through, and so many Democrats feel like it's just a replay of 2016 to see the early hopes of a landslide or a blue wave crash early on, and then the very real panic among Democrats that they weren't going to put it together. When President Trump did come out early this morning to declare something of agreement for victory, he had a very plausible path, and you could look at that map and say, okay, I see how this guy has gotten it done. And of course, that's changed as more numbers have rolled in the overnight hours and through the day today, the Wisconsin results are very definitive. 20,000 votes. We've got probably 3 times that margin and counting in Michigan. The Pennsylvania vote, we're going to get a lot more tonight and into tomorrow. It's possible that Donald Trump clings on. It's possible that there's another wide margin that something similar happens there. So the range of possible outcomes has adjusted so crazily. And of course, all of it up against the context of really not matching the polling expectations coming into the night, because there were several states, many states even, that ended up not being that close, that polling suggested would be much ugly. Otherwise, the ones that were close that people thought would be, absolute blowout. So it's been quite a range of 24 hours or so.
And because of all that, yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride, no matter which side you're on. Rick Klein, thanks very much for that. We're going to take a break right now. More ABC News Live, continuing coverage of the 2020 presidential election after this.
Election 2020 on ABC News Live continues in a moment. Want to stand out online? Go to Wix.com and create a professional website that's sure to get you noticed. Start from scratch or choose from hundreds of beautiful designer templates. Every part is completely customizable. That's perfect. Get your visitors' attention with eye-catching photos and videos. It's the best way to showcase your brand and really brings your site to life. Set up your online storefront any way you want and get paid online. Keep track of your inventory.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Well, Melania Trump, you think there's still people there that you can't trust?
Yes.
Still working out?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying.
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now in a year with so much on the line, you're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington. A very busy news night.
America's #1 source, ABC News, straightforward.
We'll guide you through it all tonight. We have made it through another week together.
We tell all our patients how much their love to American is. David, we're showing our love and support for all the ICU staff.
They're the heroes in this.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan?
July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented. John, did you kill your wife? Now, I'll never forget the first time that I met him. The chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of the killer.
Details and stunning interviews.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? The 2020 event, Friday Night on ABC.
Hey, first time, guys. Made it through.
Change has been recalled, but this is my home. This is where I want to be.
You're beginning.
Building Paradise. It will premiere Sunday at 9 on National Geographic.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day, where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening. And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days. Where you get all the breaking news information of the day to help you navigate through these times. That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine. Good morning, America. Good morning, America. Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Yeah.
This is an ABC News election update. Now reporting Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good afternoon. We're coming back on the air right now because we're about to hear from former Vice President Joe Biden in Wilmington, Delaware in just a minute. Let's give an update on where things stand right now. Joe Biden has won 21 states, 237 electoral votes, closing in on the 270 leads. Donald Trump, 23 states, won 214 electoral votes. We still see some big states out there, though. You have Arizona and Nevada in the Southwest, Michigan and Pennsylvania in the Midwest, and then, of course, Georgia and North Carolina as well. I want to go to Mary Bruce. We're about to hear from Vice President Biden now for the second time. He spoke last night. What do we expect to hear from him in just a few minutes?
We are told, George, that he is going to be upbeat, and that is because his team is feeling increasingly confident. They have made very clear as the hours have passed today that they believe that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States, and that is because in many of these still outstanding states, especially that critical blue wall that Donald Trump won in 2016, they feel that they are ahead by a margin which Donald Trump simply cannot make up at this point. They are very confident that they are winning in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, and also Arizona, George. And so Joe Biden is likely to come out here right now and make comments to that effect. The question is whether or not he's going to declare victory, which is something that he has stopped short of doing so far. I also suspect that he will continue to urge patience with this process and continue to commit and to fighting to make sure that every single vote is counted, George.
Former Vice President Biden right now. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kamala and I are here to make a brief statement, and I'm sure we'll have more to say later, either tonight or tomorrow. But let me begin by thanking the press for being here and thanking everyone else. My fellow Americans, yesterday once again proved that democracy is the heartbeat of this nation. Since it has been the heartbeat of this nation for 2 centuries. And even in the face of the pandemic, more Americans voted this election than ever before in American history. Over 150 million people cast their votes. I think that's just extraordinary. And if we had any doubts, we shouldn't have any longer about a government of, by, and for the people. It's very much alive in America. Here, the people rule. Power can't be taken or asserted. It flows from the people. And it's their will that determines who will be the President of the United States, and their will alone. And now, after a long night of counting, it's clear that we're winning enough states to reach 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. I'm not here to declare that we won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners. With all the votes counted, we have won Wisconsin by 20,000 votes, virtually the same margin that President Trump won that state 4 years ago. In Michigan, we lead by over 35,000 votes, and it's growing. A substantially bigger margin than President Trump won Michigan in 2016. Michigan will complete its vote soon, maybe as early as today. And I feel very good about Pennsylvania. Virtually all the remaining ballots to be counted were cast by mail. And we've been winning 78% of the votes by mail in Pennsylvania. We flipped Arizona and the 2nd district in Nebraska. Of special significance to me is that we've won with the majority of the American people. And every indication is that the majority will grow. With the popular vote lead of nearly 3 million votes, and every indication is that will grow as well. Indeed, Senator Harris and I are on track to win more votes than any ticket in the history of this country that ever won the presidency and vice presidency. Over 70 million votes. I'm very proud of our campaign. Only 3 presidential campaigns in the past have defeated an incumbent president. When it's finished, God willing, we'll be the 4th. This is a major achievement. It's been a long and difficult campaign, but it's been a more difficult time for our country, a hard time. We've had hard campaigns before. We faced hard times before. So once this election is finalized and behind us, It'll be time for us to do what we've always done as Americans. To put the harsh rhetoric of the campaign behind us. To lower the temperature. To see each other again. To listen to one another. To hear each other again. To respect and care for one another. To unite. To heal. To come together as a nation. I know this won't be easy. I'm not naive. Neither of us are. I know how deep and hard the opposing views are in our country on so many things. But I also know this as well. To make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies. We are not enemies. What brings us together as Americans is so much stronger than anything that can tear us apart. So let me be clear. We are campaigning as Democrats, but I will govern as an American president. The presidency itself is not a partisan institution. It's the one office in this nation that represents everyone. And it demands a duty of care for all Americans. That is precisely what I will do. I will work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as I will for those who did vote for me. Now, every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. Not now, not ever. America's come too far. America's fought too many battles. America's endured too much to ever let that happen. We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious. But this will not be my victory alone or our victory alone. It'll be a victory for the American people, for our democracy, for America. And there will be no blue states and red states when we win. Just the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Joe Biden there wrapping up his statement. I'm going to take a question there from the crowd. Let's give a sample along with Vice Presidential nominee Kamala Harris, saying very carefully that he's not there to declare victory, but believes it's clear that he was winning enough states to win the 270 electoral votes. Talking about the vote counts in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nebraska, too. Of course, his lead has been widening in Wisconsin and Michigan. We're still waiting on an awful lot of votes in Pennsylvania as well. I want to bring in Cecilia Vega first. And Cecilia, we haven't heard from President Trump today. We did hear from his campaign just in the last hour. They're disputing very heavily the idea that Joe Biden will win in Pennsylvania, and they still believe they can win the state of Arizona.
Yeah, because these are two states they need to win on their map, George, and we just got word from the campaign that they are now filing a lawsuit on the case there in Pennsylvania, the count there in Pennsylvania, asking for the vote counting to be temporarily halted. They say until all counting is done, and what they're saying is an above board and by the law. They're also, listen to this, prematurely declaring victory there. We are expected to hear from a press conference from the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and some family members of the campaign from Pennsylvania. But look, George, we've been saying this all along since early this morning and in the middle of the night, that the president is not the one who gets to declare victory. That is not the way it works. The president doesn't get to stop vote counting by a simple lawsuit like this. These are votes that are legally need to be counted. This is the way the American democratic systems work. We heard the election officials there in Pennsylvania just a couple of hours ago saying this has been among the smoother elections that they have seen in recent memory. In addition to that, we've been talking about this today. We've got this lawsuit filed by the campaign in Michigan. We've got a demand for a recount in Wisconsin, coupled with these conspiracy theories that the president has been throwing out about election integrity all day long on Twitter. So it really seems right now, George, like even though we haven't heard from the president, we are seeing this strategy being laid out at the moment, and it is very much a throw the kitchen sink strategy at this count right now.
Let me go. Thank you, Sue. We got to need some fun for the interesting.
Then Vice President Biden said the number 270. And that's it right now. If you look at all the states where he's leading, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Nebraska too, it gets in exactly 270 electoral votes. Talk first about what you're seeing in Pennsylvania. Trump team says they think we see a path to victory. Mr. Vice President Biden there saying he thinks he's going to prevail. What do you see?
In Pennsylvania, there's a lot more votes still left to count than we have in other states. They thought they would get it resolved by Thursday or Friday. If you look at counties that are more complete, it seems to have shifted just enough to Biden compared Biden to Clinton that you might win the state by a point or two when Clinton lost it by a bit less than a point. But that's certainly a case, but basically there's a lot more vote counting left to occur.
And we're going to get vote counts from Arizona tonight as well. 2 more drops of votes, and about 600,000 ballots left out there right now. Vice President Biden has about a 2 or 3 point lead. The Trump campaign believes that even though there's a lot of mail vote out there, these are more votes that favor Republicans. What will we know about that 600,000 group of votes that's still out there?
So it's not a crazy theory by the Trump campaign. It's true that you had kind of a red shift among mail votes in Arizona. Democrats sent their votes in early. Few votes came in later. If you kind of squint and look at the map in a certain way, it just might turn into a tie for Trump. But the problem is that Biden overperforms the party registration numbers in Arizona because you have a lot of ancestral John McCain Republicans who are now swing voters. You have a lot of independents who are now Democrats that in name only. So, you have to make a pretty favorable set of assumptions for Trump for him to win Arizona, but it's not crazy. I don't think the state should have been called by anyone.
Okay, and let me bring in Kate Shaw as well. We've already seen the lawsuits being filed. We presume they're going to be recounts, at least in Wisconsin, probably in more states beyond that, including perhaps Michigan. Walk through first the recount process and the potential legal challenges that could end this put this in court.
Sure. So recounts are available whenever the vote margin is close enough and someone requests a recount. So we know already that Wisconsin that is ongoing, or at least the request will be made. It seems likely that if the vote count is close enough in Michigan and Pennsylvania and perhaps other states, the candidate on the losing side of the initial numbers will seek a recount. And it could be more than just those 3 states. What there isn't any legal path to do is what the president has broadly suggested, which is just seek to stop counting. That's not a plausible legal claim. It's not one any court would recognize. There may be challenges of the sort that has been suggested might be found in Michigan. Challenges to the method or circumstances in which ballots are being counted, access, say, to observers being denied or not being sufficiently extended. So those are the kinds of lawsuits, and I think it is right what Cecilia said, this is sort of a scorched earth strategy, and we are going to see, we've already seen over 300 lawsuits prior to Election Day challenging various aspects of our election system. I think we are likely to see many more, but they need to be specific, they need to articulate a legal claim, and a lot of these feel, just from what we know so far, like they are pretty uphill legal theories for the president.
Kate Shaw, thanks. Rahm Emanuel, the message from Joe Biden that will govern as an American president. What degree of confidence do you think he would have had to have in the results to come out and give this speech at this time?
He has a high confidence. Remember, early on, their mothers had Michigan and Wisconsin right before, while everybody else was running around up with their hair on fire. So I think what he did is exactly right from 2 or 3 points from a message standpoint. 1, he was assertive without being presumptuous. 2, he had a message in a civics box. He told you the history of that this is a government of and by and for the people, cycles like Gettysburg, like what Lincoln did. But his message was about unity, which is consistent with what he did in the campaign. So that was a theory. I do think what Trump's doing on a legal strategy, if I can for 1 moment, the scorched earth policy is working the ref here. He's basically thrown a total series of dust out on Michigan and Wisconsin, knowing that it will go against him, so he can concentrate his firepower. If you're going to rule against me there, I want help on Pennsylvania. And the judge is acting a little like Solomon-esque. Are going to say, okay, we gave you those 2, maybe we need to throw it the other way. So the strategy is crazy like a fox. Don't think there's nothing here. It's not a legal strategy. Donald Trump is all about politics. I'm going to fight you on Michigan, Wisconsin. But you're going to have to give me Wisconsin because you're going to go against me on those 2.
Especially we haven't heard from the president yet. We actually heard from him quite early this morning. We haven't heard from him since that speech early this morning. Which he did face some blowback on what's the strategy going forward? Can it survive falling behind in Pennsylvania?
Well, listen, George, I think you never want to fall behind if you're going to be in a close race like this. Rob and I were discussing this earlier. You always want to be the guy who can, be fighting from ahead rather than fighting from behind. But I think there's a clear strategy here. I think Arizona hasn't been called because Arizona shouldn't be called because there still are a lot of votes out there and people don't really know what's going to happen in Arizona. None of the Biden people feel confident, but you know what? The Trump people felt confident in Wisconsin last night, and then when Milwaukee County hit, all of a sudden they were behind. I think it's close enough for Wisconsin for it to be appropriate to ask for a recount, and they have. And as far as the lawsuit in Michigan, I think it's appropriate to say we want to be able to watch these votes being counted, and apparently Michigan law allows for that. And so you, of course, would want the votes to stop being counted until the court rules. And if the court rules in your favor, then you go in and appropriately watch those votes being counted. And the same thing should apply in Pennsylvania. So, these are all things I think are very reasonable things for the president's campaign to do. What the result will be, who knows? But what we know is that we're not asking, I don't want people to misunderstand. The president's not saying through these lawsuits, don't count any more votes, leave it where it is. What he's saying is, if you want to we don't want any more votes counted until we can have representatives there watching to make sure the count is on the up and up. And I think that would be something that the Biden campaign, if they're being reasonable, would disagree about.
Okay, we're going to see a lot more vote coming in today. We expect more votes coming in from Michigan. We expect more votes coming in from Pennsylvania, and probably the remaining votes from Arizona as well. So we're going to be back, of course, with World News Tonight with David Muir, and I'll be anchoring a primetime special at 10 Eastern right here on the network. Stay with us.
We're taking a live look at the Capitol now as we continue this count in this 2020 election. We just heard a few minutes ago from former Vice President Joe Biden explicitly saying he is not declaring victory, but he says when the votes are counted, we, meaning him and his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, think that they will show that we won.
And that is the position of the Biden campaign, is that in contrast to Donald Trump, he's not suing anybody to stop the count. He said when the count is completed, as they are taking it, he will win, as you say. And that is the map right now. It's not done. It's not over. They're still counting votes. And as you can see, ABC News on the conservative side, and properly so, given what we've seen in polling and the kind of analysis of the past couple of cycles, there is still vote out enough in Nevada and Arizona, these other states, to give Donald Trump the presidency again. It's not likely, given what they're looking at, but we're going to count it.
That's right, and ABC News political director Rick Klein has been keeping track of all of it for us. Rick, what did you make from Biden's speech, particularly when you look at where the numbers are right now?
Measured, calming, I think, especially given the bluster from President Trump in the last 24 hours or so, the tone that he's trying to strike is one of leadership and one that begins to look beyond this intense moment. We heard a lot from him right there about the ability to start to reach out to people, to calm the divisions. Me is naive. That's the message, though, that he brought to the American people. And if he wins the presidency, that's the platform that he was very consistently running on from the beginning of his campaign. And look, I think the work they're confident, they're confident. President Trump and his lawyers in court. They like where they are in this position. But I'll tell you, in talking to that campaign over the last couple of days, they've been very upfront about their data, about their paths. It hasn't been threats, it hasn't been bluster. It was very straightforward. They had a plan. They executed on it. It wasn't quite the night that they hoped it would be, but it may have been a night that still delivered Joe Biden the presidency.
And May remains the question because, one of the things that Donald Trump has done best in his life, arguably, is sue people. He's sued people thousands of times. It's one of his tactics in both to get his way in business and in politics. So what about these lawsuits from the Trump campaign? What's the likelihood, you think, that they'd be successful in blocking some of these votes from being prolonged in the election? It's been fun so far that we've seen the legal alternative. One is attempts to block voting in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania until there be election monitors, people who come and vote at the time of COVID, of course. The strategy is very
in Pennsylvania, where the president's leading right now, but there are a lot of places that are still going to report back that are supposed to be favorable to Biden. The other one is more targeted, and there may be others like it, but in Pennsylvania in particular, the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago declined to say one way or the other whether Pennsylvania would be able to receive ballots that were mailed on election day, but received up until as late as this Friday, and that's been a point of contention. The Trump campaign is jumping into that fight, trying to exclude any of those votes which they presume to be for Joe Biden. But that only really matters if the initial count that includes things that votes that were received up to election day favors Joe Biden, or favors President Trump in a way that the other votes could make a difference. So, in other words, if Joe Biden is winning anyway, the additional votes would probably just be gravy to add to that pile. So, it doesn't seem to me, and I could be wrong about this, Sarah, you're the legal expert, not me, but it doesn't seem to me like they're doing anything that would substantially change the vote count itself. The votes are going to be the votes, and barring some kind of catastrophe or revelation that would not been presented, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to change the numbers.
These ballots that have been called into question, not specific ballots, but the general idea of them. The question isn't whether or not they should be counting ballots that were cast after the deadline on election day. They were cast before then. It's just a matter of when they were received. Can you explain that nuance?
Yeah, sure. Look, states have different laws around these things. There are some states where you have to send in your absentee ballot, your early vote, and have it received by election day. There's others that say, well, as long as you send it in or have it postmarked by election day, we can receive it up to a few days later. Now, Pennsylvania has never really had much of a history with early voting in the past. They changed their laws, but mostly for COVID-19. And one of the things that lawmakers tried to do was to change that deadline, to let people send in a vote as late as election day and be received a few days later. And that's where the court fight began. The state Supreme Court ultimately allowed the late counting, and the Supreme Court, a deadlocked 4-4 Supreme Court before Amy Coney Barrett was on the court, said that that would be okay. But there was a warning attached to that that's been reported on, and Terry's reported on extensively, that they may revisit that. And so it's possible it goes back before the court, but it's not clear at this stage how many votes we're talking about here, whether they have the capacity to turn the election. You've got to think about things in the context of that very close recount in Florida in 2000, but unless you have that tight margin like that, it's hard to see any of these very narrow issues becoming relevant.
Well, let me ask you, Rick, if things continue along these lines, as Vice President Biden thinks they will, can you see Donald Trump conceding that he lost?
It's hard for me to imagine those words escaping his lips. And he has spent so much of the last 4 years alleging fraud and various plots by Democrats. And I feel like his Twitter feed will continue to spread that sort of misleading information up to the day he deletes it or the day he dies. So I can't imagine him saying, you know what, the guy beat me and let's move on. I could imagine a scenario where he says, I think I should have won, I think I would have won, and I don't love it, but ultimately a peaceful transition of power. But I think these next 48 hours are critical, because those initial final vote counts, what do the numbers show in Nevada? What do they show in Arizona? What do they show when we finalize in Michigan, as we are now in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina? If, when the dust settles from all of that, there is a viable path and a plausible legal argument to make that there's a challenge that could overturn it, then I could see an active flurry of court fights in multiple state capitals, Florida on steroids. If, on the other hand, it appears that President Trump has lost enough states that he's losing pretty badly, I just don't see it. I don't see how you keep up a fight like that unless you've got the facts on your side.
And Rick, we're coming up on almost 24 hours now since the first polls closed and those votes started being counted. As we head into evening now, what do you make of what we've seen so far in this count, and what do you think we should expect going into tonight?
Yeah, that's kind of jarring for you to say, because I haven't slept in this for 24 hours.
Neither has Terry, and I've gotten a very small amount, so what about you?
It's very strange to think about this very long day that we've been
But I mean, it was a little wild series of events. I mean, to have those initial returns come through and so many Democrats feel like it's just a replay of 2016 to see the early hopes of a landslide or a blue wave crashed early on, and then very real panic among Democrats that they weren't going to put it together. When President Trump did come out early this morning to declare something of a premature victory, he had a very plausible path, and you could look at that map and say, okay, I see how this guy has gotten it done. And of course, that's changed as more numbers have rolled in the overnight hours and through the day today. The Wisconsin results are very definitive, 20,000 votes. We've got probably 3 times that margin and counting. A lot more tonight and into tomorrow. It's possible that Donald Trump comes on. It's possible that there's another wide margin that's pretty similar there. So the range of possible outcomes has adjusted so crazily, and of course, all of it against the context of really not matching the polling expectations coming into the night. Is that there were several states, many states even ended up not being that close that polling suggested would be much different. Otherwise, the ones that were close that people thought would be absolute blowout. So it's been quite a range of 24 hours or so. And because of all that, it's been a roller coaster ride. No matter which side you're on. Rick Klein, thanks very much for that. We're going to take a break right now. More ABC News Live, continuing coverage of the 2020 presidential election after the election 2020.
2020 was different, to say the least. We had virtual dance parties and ordered takeout fees. But before we give 2020 last looks, hold on to those memories with photo books. Find the good and let it fly at shutterfly.com.
Information of the day to help you navigate through these times. That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine. Good morning, America. Good morning, America. Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that. Stand down.
I've been quested to bring this one back to its kind. If I can locate other Mandalorians, they can guide me.
This is no place for a child.
Wherever I go, he goes.
The Mandalorian new season now streaming only on Disney+.
Reality is our country can collapse from within.
See the white power movement on March. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville to Newton and special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call for
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
We all need someone who pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts. This is an ABC News Live special.
Such a vote, such a success. The citizens of this country have come out in record numbers. This is a record. Has never been anything like it. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
From ABC News Election Headquarters, Election 2020.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for streaming with us. I'm Diane Macedo at ABC News headquarters in New York. And the race for the White House is still too close to call. That surge of early and mail-in voting is still being counted as we speak. But ABC News is now projecting Joe Biden will win the key state of Michigan. That state has gone to Democrats in the past, but it famously went to Donald Trump 4 years ago. Again, ABC News now projecting Joe Biden has won the state of Michigan. And ABC News Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks joins us now to for a look at what this means. Mary Alice, how big of a win is Michigan for Joe Biden, and what does that do for the map right now?
Yeah, this is huge for Joe Biden, a pretty big blow to the president, really narrowing his possible path to 270. Look, Joe Biden's team had said all day they felt confident about the state, and his numbers were trending up there. Every time more of that mailed-in vote was counted, his numbers went up. This was something we talked about as a possible just reality of the count there in these Midwestern states. For weeks, we knew that a number of these states would not be counting that mail-in vote until Election Day. We knew that mail-in vote was very likely to skew Democrat, and that's really what we saw. The mail-in vote came from an early absentee vote came from those big Democratic cities, and it was enough to put him over the edge. Interesting here is going to be the margin. Right now, the margin that we're seeing was we're told it would be pretty hard for there to be a recount challenge, but that margin could narrow again. So I think there's going to be questions about whether the margin could be close enough to a recount, but we're not seeing that yet. But there will be questions about the margins, and obviously the president and his team are going to have to respond about how they see their map now.
And the president and his team said that they already launched a lawsuit into Michigan, saying they haven't been given what they consider to be the proper access to see the vote counts. What do we know about that lawsuit right now?
Not a lot. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it yet. But it's actually a really transparent process. There were cameras in a lot of the rooms or just outside a lot of the rooms that were doing the count. You could see some of the poll workers counting the ballots through glass windows. I was pretty surprised at how calm, cool, collected the elected officials there in Michigan were today. They came out, they gave regular press conferences, they gave regular updates. They were very transparent about where they still had mail-in votes to count. And like I said, this was something they had talked about for weeks. They said if it is tight, every single one of those mailed-in ballots could matter. And they were right in the end. And they had committed to making sure that every vote that was legally cast was counted. And right now it's looking like that's exactly what happened.
Wisconsin's one of the other states we heard from recently. We haven't projected it yet, but right now Joe Biden is the apparent winner. We are seeing 100% reporting there. What does that do in terms of to have both of these states now, one officially projected, the other with Joe Biden being the apparent winner? What does that do in terms of contesting these results? Because we have seen the Trump campaign already call for a recount in Wisconsin before we even had those results in. But we've also seen recounts in Wisconsin before yield very small results.
Yeah, exactly. But look, if the margin is close, then either party, either candidate can call for a recount, but it has to be really close. So we will see where exactly that final sort of margin ends up. I do think that it's possible we end up in a scenario where we are, where one or both of the campaigns asks for a recount there in Wisconsin. But look, if this map holds right now, and that Biden holds on to the leads that he has right now, he's ahead in the vote in Arizona, but he's not ahead in the vote in Pennsylvania. But if the map kind of holds right now, then Joe Biden, it looks like, would just barely eke out a win. The big question right now is still Pennsylvania. We have a significant amount of votes still out there. With some estimates, hundreds of thousands of votes still out, but the president up with a big margin, as you see. So I think that Pennsylvania could come down absolutely to the wire. Again, a state that's not surprising that we're seeing this sort of slow, methodical count. Pennsylvania also did not start counting those ballots, those mailed-in ballots, until Election Day.
Yeah, we did, of course, expect this, and we, you and Rick Klein spent all week warning us that this would happen. But, when you get to the day, everybody wants to know. And so Americans are bad at being patient. We want to know, and elections are a really big deal. So we are trying to be patient, and we're trying to remind the viewers to do the same. We know that every vote has to be counted, but we do like to try to eke out of you guys, how much information you do know. And these two states, no doubt, good news for Joe Biden, for him to hear how it looks like he's doing in Wisconsin and in Michigan. But, as you mentioned, there is still a path to victory for President Trump right now.
He would need to hold on to a win in Pennsylvania. He would need to secure that win in Pennsylvania. There's still a lot of ballots to go through there. And then he would have to sort of flip the script on Arizona. Right now, we haven't seen evidence that there's that much more outstanding vote in Arizona. So it'll be sort of interesting to see any final reports from that state. Obviously, it's too. We haven't had any projections from our decision desk yet with Arizona, but we see Joe Biden up with a slight margin there. So the president really has this one singular path. He would need to hold on to Pennsylvania, and he would need to pull ahead somehow in Arizona. We need to be braced for all possibilities. One more possibility I would just throw in the mix. We haven't had any projections with Georgia, and Democrats are still liking what they're seeing and with some of the outstanding vote there. So we have to be patient still and be open to all possibilities. The campaigns are wanting us to be open to all possibilities, and we should more than that.
We may not be good at patient, but I do think 2020 has taught us to be open to all possibilities. Mary Alice, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, neither President Trump or former Vice President Joe Biden have secured those 270 electoral votes they need to win the presidency. But overnight, we heard the president claim victory anyway. He even went so far as to call the process fraudulent. And then in the last hour or so, former Vice President Joe Biden came out saying that he's not declaring victory, but he did add that when the votes are counted, his team believes that they have won. ABC's Andrew Dipper is in Washington with the latest.
It's a race to the finish line, and the margin still razor thin in the states that could tip the scales in the 2020 election, as predicted for months. Counting the record-shattering number of mail-in and absentee votes in battleground states is taking time, as anxious Americans wait to see who wins the White House. Although the race is still too close to project, last night both President Trump and Joe Biden securing several all-important wins.
We are now projecting Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio. The other state that projected is the state of Virginia. It is going to Joe Biden.
It was a roller coaster election night for both candidates, seeing leads evaporate, change, and tighten in some crucial states. Biden addressing the nation this evening, not declaring victory, but saying he's confident he will win once the votes are counted.
We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be moved. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious.
President Trump, however, again casting doubt on the election's integrity without evidence, demanding that no more votes be counted.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
Legal experts say the president can't stop the vote counting, and state officials are promising to count every valid vote.
Our election clerks and our election workers have been working throughout the night to tabulate every vote and ensure that every vote is counted.
Every legal vote will count.
With all precincts reporting in Wisconsin and Joe Biden holding just a half-point lead, ABC News is characterizing Biden as the apparent winner in the state. Trump's team already promising a recount. Biden is also holding on to much of the blue wall states, but there could be cracks. Trump is leading in Pennsylvania, but officials say there are millions more ballots to be tallied, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled they have through Friday to count them. And to be clear, election officials had been cautioning in the lead-up to election night that it would take days to count millions of mail-in ballots. But the fact that this is taking time is not all that uncommon, and doesn't mean there's a problem. Andrew Dipper, ABC News, Washington.
Thanks to Andrew for that. Now let's go to ABC's Kira Phillips, who's tracking the latest developments for us as those ballots are counted. Kira, what do you see? Well, there's a lot that we're seeing. First of all, I'm being told that President Trump is in the White House right now, huddled with his advisors, planning his battle plan to win this election. As you know, he's already filed a lawsuit in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, asking for a recount. Filing a lawsuit in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and asking for a recount, demanding a recount in Wisconsin. Just moments ago, Diane, wrapping up a news conference in Pennsylvania. His son, Eric Trump, his wife by his side, Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General from Florida, an advisor to Trump, also a lawyer, and also Corey Lewandowski, also an advisor to the president, along with Pam, Rudy Giuliani, rather, the president's personal attorney, talking about how they have declared victory in Pennsylvania. The quote actually from Eric Trump was that it's very clear to us, and we have declared victory in Pennsylvania. That state has not officially been called, but they are saying they already won the state.
And then Rudy Giuliani stepped up to the mic announcing that they have witnessed and seen fraud in that state, and they are not going to put up with it, and this is what he said.
Not a single Republican has been able to look at any one of these mail ballots. They could be from Mars, as far as we're concerned, or they could be from the Democratic National Committee. Joe Biden could have voted 50 times, as far as we know, or 5,000 times.
And on top of that, the Trump campaign, top aides, family members, also allies of the president, have been out there tweeting victory in Pennsylvania as well. And I'm seeing now that Twitter actually fired back, labeling those tweets, Diane, saying official sources may not have called the race when this was tweeted. So basically slapping a label on all those tweets coming out. Well, as you can imagine, the president responding immediately, putting out his own tweets. We have claimed for electoral vote purposes the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which won't allow legal observers, the state of Georgia and the state of North Carolina, each one of which has a big Trump lead. Additionally, we hereby claim the state of Michigan if, in fact, there was a large number of secretly dumped ballots, as has been widely reported. As you know, as you just mentioned at the top of your show, Diane, ABC calling Michigan to Joe Biden at this point, which is why now we are seeing this lawsuit that has been filed also in Pennsylvania. The Trump campaign claiming victory. Now they're talking about a lawsuit there because that has not officially been called. And on top of that, you saw in Trump's tweet when he was talking about which won't allow legal observers, that they're not allowing legal observers to monitor the voting process there in Pennsylvania. I can tell you, Pam Bondi, the former attorney general, talked about that as well, claiming that they have video proving that the Trump campaign, that their poll watchers have been intimidated and have been forced far away enough where they can't observe the voting process that took place yesterday. So a lot to follow, a lot to keep up with. This is far from over, Diane, that's for sure.
That we know. All right, Kira Phillips, thank you. And another state too close to call this evening, it's Georgia. Elwin Lopez is in Atlanta with more on this. Elwin, we know that this was leading toward President Trump. What's the latest that we have now?
Diane, Kara was talking about Trump having a big lead, that lead there in the Peach State. It's literally there. We were talking about 100,000 votes. That's how much Trump was ahead earlier in the day. That now is about at 78,000 is what we have now. And of course, that could change throughout the day. Now, Fulton County, here where we are, this is the most populous county in the state. They were having some issues yesterday here at State Farm Arena right behind me where they had a pipe burst. Now, the good news is that no ballots were damaged, but they did experience a 3 to 4 hour delay. Now, the Secretary of State says that they're hoping to have results here for Georgia by the end of the day. And of course, that is something that everyone wants, not only people here in Georgia, but across the nation to see exactly where Georgia stands. Now, the last time that Georgia went blue was in 1992 when Bill Clinton won. And of course, now Joe Biden hoping to do the same here, Diane.
And it sounded like, at least earlier, there didn't look like a huge likelihood that Joe Biden would be able to turn this around. That's what we heard from Steve Osasami earlier. Has that changed at all now?
Well, this is a battleground state, and again, as these votes are coming in, they're just trying to see whether that is a possibility or not. Of course, as the recount, as these results are coming in and they're counting these votes, that is constantly changing. So there's always a possibility. Of course, Biden is hoping for that. And again, on Trump's campaign, they're saying there's no way that they're not going to win Georgia. But of course, all these votes have to be counted. The Secretary of State's office said earlier today that every legal vote counts and matters, and they're going to make sure that that happens here in the Peach State. Diane.
Our thanks to Elwin Lopez in Atlanta. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love, wherever and whenever you want them. You'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about everything.
what is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
feel smarter,
feel better.
feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know, lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
ABC News, America's #1 source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward. Download the app now and sign up to get important breaking news alerts wherever you are. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming source of ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop, original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, and ESPN. And it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there. What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Award saying it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back. We are looking again at the results of the 2020 presidential election, still up for grabs. So we're going to unpack it a little bit with our virtual roundtable now. Joining us this evening, former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, Republican political consultant Alex Castellanos, and SiriusXM radio host Mike Mears. Thank you all for being here today. I know it's been a long day for everyone, so we appreciate you hanging in there with us.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having us.
Mike, I want to start with you. I know Michigan's your home state. Just recently, that was a call for Joe Biden. Donald Trump won that state in 2016. So what do you think changed?
Diane, if you cannot see my smile, I'm sorry to be a little bit out of character right now, but Michigan delivered. I am from Michigan, born and raised in Lansing, Michigan. Lived in Detroit for 2 years. The nation criticized Detroit for not coming out with the vote in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and Detroit said not this year, and I don't know what. And black people in Detroit, I'm being very specific, black people in Detroit delivered the state of Michigan for Vice President Biden. It is such a great moment. Really Detroit is such a bad rap for so many things. But Detroit is strong. Detroit is resilient. Detroit has a passion, the spirit of the people, which is why they say the spirit of Detroit. And so to all of those who are watching Detroit, I say, what up, though? Enjoy some burgers and some better Lay's potato chips for me tonight. But yes, Diane, to get back into characters, that is what happened. The Biden campaign, they knew that Michigan was one of their strongholds. They knew they had to bring Michigan back on the map, not only for 2020, Diana, but for 2022, the midterms coming up, and in 2024. They knew they had to show up and be present for black voters. Hillary Clinton didn't do that. And in 2016, she didn't feel the need to stop there. And I think that black Americans felt some type of way about that, in particular Detroiters. So Detroiters want you to be present with them, to show that you care. And in turn, they will reward you. And the proof is in the pudding. And included, Diana, Flint, another majority black city. We know the crisis that Flint was having with the Flint water. They also, too, have turned out for Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris.
All right, so Mike Mears is very excited about Michigan. I'm guessing Alex is less so, but Alex, obviously President Trump is not out of this just yet by any means. He seems particularly optimistic about Pennsylvania. Talk to us about what you're seeing there.
Well, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump now has really a very narrow path. He's got to win Arizona. He's got to hang on to Georgia. He's got to hang on to Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Arizona's still a bit of a stretch, but it's possible. But Pennsylvania, those votes are coming in. Biden is getting in about 8 out of every 10 of these last remaining 1.1 million votes, I think, we still have to count in Pennsylvania. And the same thing is happening in Pennsylvania that unfortunately happened in Michigan, which is the Democrats did a pretty good job with their mail-in campaign. And you give credit for that. Usually you don't want to deny your voters any opportunity to vote.
just one. And unfortunately, Donald Trump and his supporters don't vote by mail. Guess what? We're now seeing the results of that. Democrats ran a good effort. They did the same in Pennsylvania. So we're going to see that state tighten. I'm not sure the Democrats can close the gap there, but they don't have to. All they have to do is hang on to Arizona or Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Georgia, one of them. Otherwise, if he gets 4 states, those 4 states will turn into 270.
So, Barbara, it's a narrowing path to victory for the president right now. He's not out, but it's looking less likely for him than it is for Joe Biden at this point. However, it did turn out to be a pretty good day for Republicans down the ballot. The Democrats are going to maintain control of the House, but Republicans appear to have won a few seats there. And despite Democrats' hopes of taking over the Senate, that does not look like it's going to happen. Talk to me a little bit about the down ballot races and what you think that the picture that paints for the government going forward, regardless of who's president.
Well, it was much better turnout than we expected. First of all, hats off to Mitch McConnell in the Senate majority, and he will remain that. Mitch is just a great leader, takes care of his caucus, really has, made sure the diverse caucus could, get home and, on election night and be able to win the majority, and they delivered. And when I saw my friend Susan Collins, get through today, she's so gracious, she's so lovely, she's so dogged, and such a hard worker. I think it's so exciting for her to have a quality woman like that remaining caucus, as well as people like Joni Ernst, and certainly the Tom Tillis race looks good. And then secondly, we were going into the race from the numbers we got in the polling. We thought we were going to lose House races, and I worked with two groups called PAC, from a women's PAC group, and also Winning for Women. And we were concerned that these great quality women we had weren't going to get through because of the undertow of a lot of the challenges that the president had out there, particularly for some of the suburban women. So we were very excited that we're probably, by the time they get through all the counting of the votes, we're going to have 28, 29 women in Congress, which is going to be an all-time high, which is our goal this year, was just to get 20. We didn't try and overshoot too much, but we ended up sort of having it looks like maybe a 50% improvement. And these are really talented women too. Women like Maria Salazar would want a seat. There was a Democrat seat, one against Donna Shalala, obviously somebody very well known in the Clinton community. We also saw, we had Bradford, our controversy. It was targeted, they spent millions against her, so that was very exciting that we were going to have probably a gain of about 5 or 6 seats. And the DCCC chairwoman, Sherry Bustos, almost lost her seat. She went bust in terms of, they were talking about having 10 or 20 gains on the Democrat side. So I think you're going to hear calls for leadership changes, certainly on the DCCC committee, on the issue of Nancy Pelosi yourself. You've already seen that. And then third, I'd like to raise state legislatures, which the Republican State Leadership Council did a bang-up job of holding on to state legislatures in Florida and Georgia and North Carolina, where we also got an African-American lieutenant governor, the first ever in North Carolina. Also had good outcomes in Iowa and Texas, where I think $50 million had been spent to try to take over the state house in Texas. We maintained that. We flipped a house in New Hampshire. So it was a great night where we have this infrastructure and farm team with a great and diverse Republicans, and now more women in our caucus in the House for 200. So it was, down ballot was much better than expected, and going forward, that's very promising.
All right, I didn't think we'd be able to match Mike's level of enthusiasm talking about Michigan, but I think we may have found it and asked Barbara about the down ballot races. Mike, when you look at that dynamic, though, and the fact that Republicans did do well down the ballot, and the fact that even if President Trump loses this election, he did outperform the polls, what does that tell you about what the Democratic Party needs to do in order to unify people as Joe Biden is campaigning on?
So that's another great point. If former Vice President Biden becomes a president-elect and then he becomes president of inauguration during the peaceful transition of power, Vice President Biden will have a challenge within the Senate. He will have to participation. I think they work effectively with Senator Mitch McConnell to actually pass that. And I'm actually going to go on the limb, and I'm actually going to say that I do believe that Senator Mitch McConnell will actually want to work with Vice President Biden if he's elected in order to get things done for the country. There's no way our democracy, and at the end of the day, what I will say about Mitch McConnell is that he does care about America, even though he may see things differently from a lot of Democrats. I think at his core, he wants to do what he can to protect our democracy. And the fact that we've been so polarized, so divisive in these last 4 years, I don't think Senator Mitch McConnell will want that to be on his record, that he served as the majority leader and he did everything in his power to block any legislation going forward from Vice President Biden as a president-elect and the president to do things to move America forward. Their dynamics is simply too much at stake. We have COVID-19. We have over 200,000, 230,000 deaths that have occurred, a job loss at an all-time high. People are feeling frustrated, and people want hope. And so I think what he did with President Obama by saying in 2008 that he should have to make him a one-term president, I think he learned his lesson from that. And we want to make sure that we don't put politics in front of this, but we actually want to put Americans in front of this, because Americans have gone through a tough time in 2020, and we just came into 2021. No one will be gridlock for the next 4 years. He doesn't want that on his record. So there's going to be bold reach out from both sides of the aisle, but I think it's also to the onus is on Mitch McConnell, because he will be the lone Republican in control of that part of the legislative branch that can stop progress of the American people.
And Alex, in addition to the path to victory that does still exist for President Trump within the electoral votes, he's also threatened lawsuits. The campaign has already gotten involved in a few lawsuits over this election. At what point is this reasonable and called for, and at what point does the president need to accept the results of this election, particularly considering that the rest of the party did pretty well down the ballot?
Well, I think the president has to do that when it's proven that he lost a fair election. That's when, and not before. Look, imagine you're Donald Trump, and Democrats have been trying to delegitimize the vote you received 4 years ago up until the day he ran again. Democrats have tried to impeach this president, calling him a paid Russian agent and a traitor. They call his voters racist. And why would you put yourself in Trump's shoes? Why would you think the Democrats are going to actually treat you fairly in this election if they tried to delegitimize you the last one until the day you ran again? So I don't think the Democrats have the credibility here with Republicans, or the media has credibility with Republicans to say you lost fair and square. We're going to need to see the vote. We're going to need to open up the process. We're going to need to let people look at this. If the states are close, and if they're not, that's a different story. But this is the price I think the media pays for being so partisan and taking either side. And I think this is the price Democrats pay to undermine a legitimately elected president for 4 years.
Barbara, you're a Republican who very much supports your party clearly, but does not support the president. What's your thought on all this?
Well, I joined with a group called let me see, the name of it is the National Council for Election Integrity. It's a bipartisan group with leaders like Dan Coates, former Senator Dan Coates, Madeleine Albright, and others who are very concerned about, given that we are in a 50-50 nation, we wanted to make sure we knew this was going to be close in any number of states. That's why so much money is being spent in these states. So we wanted to, if we had these type of situations, have a very serious and sober effort to make sure we count all the votes and that everybody supports us. So that's what our group is about, to make sure we count all the votes, whether it's in Arizona where they still are counting the votes, and the president's team thinks they might have a case there. Martha McSally thinks she might, so they're working on it. Everywhere else, we're slowly and soberly counting the votes, and we need to do that. But when you're talking about seriously and soberly doing something, bringing Rudy Giuliani and his roadshow, like we had in the press conference today, is not helpful for that. Corey Lewandowski coming in there and just lobbing accusations when at a time we need to be bringing everyone together and doing this seriously. I remember back in the 2000 election, Alex Assiana and I worked together, on those weeks and weeks when we were in Florida to get that recount done. And we had people like James Baker and Ted Olson doing the legal work. David Boies was on the other side with the Democrats. If they're going to be doing this in any kind of legal way, they need to get serious people there and not bring kind of bringing the impeachment ban back together and just lobbing these accusations. That is not helpful. I understand the president has a lot of grievances and he's upset about things, but this is bigger than him, and that's why I think when you're talking about Mitch McConnell being serious about things and wanting to work together, I think you will see many of our senators kind of come together and say, let's do this seriously and soberly, count the votes, get through this process, and then we have to live with whatever, our 50-50 country designs. When you lose a vote, when you lose an election close, it's not fun. I won my first race by 422 votes. And it would have not been fun if it had been a 22-vote loss. But you've got to accept that. That's part of the process. So these endless legal challenges are not going to be constructive in bringing the country back together. So I hope the team Trump will take a step back. Professionals do that. People are involved and engaged on the state level. Each state has some different rules. We can go through that process and let all the votes be counted.
Hi, Barbara Comstock, Mike Hughes, and Alex Castellanos. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go Blue.
And do stay with us as we continue our election coverage. 2020 election still not called, but we are monitoring those results for you, and we'll be right back.
Stand down. I've been quested to bring this one back to its kind. If I can locate other Mandalorians, they can guide me. This is no place for a child. Wherever I go, he goes. The Mandalorian new season now streaming only on Disney+.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day, where you spend your morning, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking news information of the day to help you navigate through these times. That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Like a fascination with criminal trials, figure out what's really out there. Reveal Chad murder his family.
I know in my heart they did this. It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find. Unless you try to find it.
Tonight, get ready for a con so big, so outrageous, never seen anything like it before. Two twins pretending to be part of one of the world's richest royal families, living large lives.
Holy cow, who is this person? He stole approximately $8.1 million.
Where was all this money coming from?
Buckle up, just the tip of the iceberg.
I will be over. This is the con. And royally good on ABC.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the 2020 election. We're taking a live look at the Capitol now. We still do not know who the next president will be, but here's a look at where we stand right now. Again, Joe Biden and President Trump each have to win 270 electoral votes in order to secure the presidency. Currently, we are looking at Joe Biden with 253. President Trump has 214, but you can see still a few key battleground states up for grabs, and those can make all of the difference. We are keeping a close eye on those. And if you take a look, one of those states is Arizona. Right now, a tight race there between Joe Biden and President Trump. You can see the breakdown there right now. Joe Biden at 51%, Donald Trump President Trump at 48%, but only 86% of the vote in right now. So there's still still up for grabs there. Arizona's Secretary of State Katie Hobbs joins us now from Phoenix to help us dig down a little bit further. Secretary Hobbs, first of all, thanks for being here. I know it's a really busy day, so we appreciate your time. Tell us a little bit about what your state is doing to ensure that every ballot is counted and that everything is being done according to law.
We are absolutely focused right now on making sure that every single ballot is counted. There are around 600,000 votes still to be counted in Arizona. We have folks at the tabulation centers in every county working on that right now. And in terms of security, there are party observers allowed in to watch that process. Additionally, all of the tabulation centers have cameras, and so anyone can go to the county elections website in any county and watch that process as it happens while it's happening. So a lot of security there. We are really focused right now on getting these votes counted, and hopefully we'll know more tonight where we stand. Maricopa County is obviously the largest county in Arizona, 2/3 of the voting population, and there'll be 400,000 of those outstanding ballots are in Maricopa, and they'll be releasing a lot more totals this evening.
Now, for the Maricopa County Recorder, there are over 400,000 ballots to be counted, over 160,000 absentee ballots dropped off at the polls yesterday. Any expectations on how this will impact the overall vote, and how challenging has it been to deal with this level of mail-in ballots?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit, but I think that, in 2018, we had 4 races that were, Republicans were ahead on election night, and when we started counting these early ballots after election day, those 4 races swung to the Democratic candidate, my race included. Certainly there is a lot of scrutiny on Arizona, and we are focused on getting this right. As I mentioned, people can watch this process on the cameras, and we are working diligently to get it done.
And Secretary Hobbs, any thoughts on when we could see those results come in?
Well, Maricopa County has not let us, they have let us know that they are releasing more vote totals at 7 p.m. Arizona time and 9:30 p.m. Arizona time this evening, but they haven't said how many they anticipate being in those batches. When we see that number, then that'll give us a good sense of kind of how long it will take for them to get through the rest of the ballots.
All right, Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. And ABC News Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks joins us now for more on this. Mary Alice, what are you seeing as the votes are counted in places like Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania?
Well, different stories in each of those states. Arizona has a long history of early voting. The other states that you mentioned, they're pretty new. They had to go through some pretty dramatic changes to ramp up their early and mail-in voting operations. But as you just heard, Arizona's been, and Arizonans have been used to this, and that can mean a few things. One, it can mean that early vote might not have such a blue hue. There is a lot of Republicans in Arizona that also vote early and also vote by mail. But traditionally, we do see across the board more Democrats comfortable with the idea of voting by mail. That's why so many of these late-breaking ballots that are counted in the end that were mailed in tend to favor Democrats. But Arizona is just, an interesting story where we have the majority of the outstanding ballots still from Maricopa County. It's the largest county in Arizona. It's sort of the county that takes it all. Right now in our count, Biden's up about 52% across the board in Maricopa County. Pretty good margin for him. Not incredible, kind of matches the statewide numbers there. But so knowing that the outstanding vote is also from Maricopa County, it could be pretty good for him as they wrap up their work there in Arizona.
And Mary Alice, we got some conflicting information from Georgia as to how many ballots were still outstanding. What's the latest there?
Yeah, what we know is that there's definitely outstanding ballots in some of the really racially diverse, Democratic-leaning cities. And I think that's probably where we'll see the most interesting updates in the Georgia vote. That's where we could see the largest swings, if there are swings still to be had when all is said and done there in Georgia. But part of this is because I think that all of these states had to kind of take stock of exactly what was left to be counted. When they have to get the information from all the different counties. Sometimes there's discrepancy. And so you're right, over the course of today, we were getting individual updates from some of those individual counties about just how many more ballots they had. I will say that over the course of the day, the margins have narrowed there. Joe Biden has kept it pretty interesting, and we're going to see if the margins continue to narrow or not.
All right, Mary Alice Parks, our Deputy Political Director. We appreciate it, Mary Alice. Thanks. And of course, we continue to watch the count come in and continue to listen for different states as they tell us they will be sending us updates throughout the night. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll check in on what the Trump campaign is saying. Stay with us.
Entire neighborhoods are underwater, 24/7 streaming to the source of ABC News. Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to news, compelling live video. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling. ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen. Every report, free, and imagine, celebrating epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind you? They're trying to put the fire out right now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as your live TV. All of the smoke here, all live. No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it. Frightening. And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail. Only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Wow. Watch ABC News Live right now at any time you're streaming on mobile, Facebook, ABC.com.
ABC News Live.
Right to you.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the 2020 election. Currently taking a look at the count, we have former Vice President Joe Biden with 253 electoral votes, President Trump with 214. Again, they will need 270 to win the election, so it is still up for grabs. ABC's Kira Phillips has been keeping track of the count for us. And Kira, what are we hearing now from the president's team?
I think this is probably the first time, Diane, I'm ever going to say this, but we are hearing silence. Actually, what we're hearing is a call from the White House that there's been a lid. And what does that mean? As someone who covers the White House, you hear that across the intercom where we all sit there in the press area of the White House, and that means we're not hearing any people from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And that lid was just called. And Diane, I know you probably see it in your email. There are pool notes, and that's various reporters that are a part of the president's entourage traveling and covering his every move. We're not always a part of that, but there's always a pool that's sort of in touch to everything. And the pooler, when that lid was called, put out this email, Diane. As we await further news and results, your pooler would humbly suggest following the village people's sage advice that we've all heard so much this year. So you can get yourself clean, you can have a good meal, you can do whatever you feel. So I love how everybody
the end of the day today is already a little unhappy and tired and trying to add a little humor to the pool notes as we continue everything that has been going on. As you know, Diane, the president, I mentioned last hour, huddled with his advisors there at the White House, planning his battle to win re-election, already filing a lawsuit in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and now asking for a recount in Wisconsin. Injecting a little humor into a very tense story, maybe induced by a little sleep deprivation and insanity as a result of that. But Kira, we'll take the last where we can find them, right? We're also, I know we're waiting for this presser on the vote in Pennsylvania. What's the latest there? Okay, so more than likely, this is going to be, of course, the ongoing lawsuit and other lawsuits that have been brought forward. But it was within the last hour that we talked about this news conference that was held with Eric Trump, the president's son. Eric Trump's wife was by his side. Also, Pam Bondi, the former attorney general for Florida, who's an advisor to Trump. She's a lawyer. Corey Lewandowski, who's an advisor to Trump on the 2020 campaign. And then one of the most colorful characters within the president's circle, his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, stepping up to the mic there. And basically, what he was actually, you know what? Can we listen to this? Can we re-rack this, Kate, and play this? We can't do it. All right, I got a big fat no, but I can tell you generally what he said. And he was talking about how they believe there has been voter fraud committed in Pennsylvania, and Pam Bondi coming forward to the mic after Rudy Giuliani saying that they have video proving that Trump poll watchers were being intimidated and kept away from the polls. That's Pam Bondi that you see right there. So, and even Trump family members and aides and presidents to the allies, they started tweeting that the president has declared victory in Pennsylvania, that they all declare victory in President Trump. Here, I'll tell you this, you know this, that state has not been declared victory for Trump just yet. So, I'm assuming this live press conference that we are waiting for, that you are going to take live out of Pennsylvania will respond to all these allegations that Giuliani and the team there are making about voter fraud and the count and the fact that they are declaring victory in that state when it has not been declared so far. All right, we were going to look out for that presser. Kira Phillips in D.C., thanks for the update as always, and thanks for the laugh, Kira. We needed that. You bet. And right now we're going to take a quick break, but stay with us. We have more of ABC News Live's continuing coverage of the 2020 presidential election after this.
Hello, this Montana Highway Patrol. Looking for a couple of missing teenagers. That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel's getting stiff. Fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
Thank you to the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals,
And first responders.
thank you to everyone keeping our supermarkets, pharmacies, gas stations running. Thank you to all the essential workers for all that you do. Thank you. We thank you.
We thank you. We thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. And with every challenge, punishment, concern, will be your day. Every day.
Every day.
Every day. Because we will get through this together.
We all need someone who will no punches into a screen. Now, imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward. Wait, stand down.
I've been quested to bring this one back to its kind. If I can locate other Mandalorians, they can guide me.
This is no place for a child. Wherever I go, he goes.
The Mandalorian, new season now streaming only on Disney Plus.
fighting.
I'll never forget the first time that I met him. Chill raced up my spine. I just shook the hand of the killer. Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished. Did you kill your wife?
No, it's 2020 events Friday on
Welcome back to our special coverage of the 2020 presidential election. Again, ballots are still being counted as we near the 24-hour mark after the first polls closed. We still have no winner projected yet, but Joe Biden appears to have a clearer path if he can hold his lead in some key states there. Right now, Joe Biden looking at 253 electoral votes. President Trump has two.
Is reiterating that nonstop here in the state, in the Peach State. Now, we were having issues here in Fulton County at State Farm where they were counting ballots yesterday. There was a pipe that burst. It caused a 3 to 4 hour delay. The good news there is that no ballots were damaged. But of course, they want to continue voting and continue to get this process done. They do expect to have results here in Georgia by the end of the night, but we've been waiting here. Earlier today, the Secretary of State said that it would be by midday. By midday or by later this afternoon, and we're here still waiting for those results to come in. Again, just to remind our viewers, Fulton County is a Democratic stronghold, so they are expecting the votes here to favor Biden. And below 200,000 ballots have yet to be counted. So again, that's a good amount of ballots that have yet to be counted in this state, and of course, Biden is hoping that those will favor him. Right?
All right, Ellen Lopez there in Atlanta. We appreciate it. Thank you. And let's bring in ABC News Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks now. Mary Alice, a little bit earlier in the evening, it looked like Biden's chances of winning Georgia were unlikely, to say the least. Has that picture changed at all?
Well, the margin has definitely tightened over the course of the day. And part of what's interesting here is where exactly in the state the outstanding vote is. You heard the conversation there about Fulton County. Somewhere between north of 60,000 ballots still yet to be counted. That could be really good for Joe Biden. DeKalb County, too. It's a flat county. We've seen Democrats there with some large margins in the past. And again, we're seeing probably around 40,000 absentee ballots remaining to be counted. We're getting updates from all these individual counties. So it's a slow process. It's a messy process. The counties are sometimes readjusting when they learn more about exactly how many ballots they have to go through. And then there's two other counties that are kind of the Atlanta suburbs, going into this election that I hope to stand in those suburbs. And right now, Joe Biden has been improving upon the margins that Hillary Clinton had in those areas. And we still have some absentee ballots from those sort of suburban counties outside of Atlanta still to be counted. So the story here, the president's still very much on top. It is Georgia, a southern state after all, but interesting to watch the margins there and the election officials still just doing their jobs and counting those votes.
All right, Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks. Thanks, Mary Alice. And ABC's Adrian Bankert is in Michigan, which ABC News has projected will be a win for Joe Biden. Adrian, this was a nail-biter all day. What's the latest from Michigan?
Well, Diane, here's the thing. When you hear this story, what President Trump said in his statements overnight, then that Biden is the projected winner of Michigan. But yet the count has been so tight, and there's been so many different undulations of who was in the lead, who was the front runner. You've got all these people outside, claims that they were being blocked from going inside and being election challengers, ballot counters, and poll watchers. And what is the difference between all of these different terms? Having gone here and talked to several of these people, I think I have a lot more
clarity. I still need to read in on some of this information. In fact, one of them handed me the appointment rights and duties of election challengers and poll watchers. But essentially, it's this. There is a duty that volunteers can come down here. They can count ballots. They can monitor the count to make sure that it's being done correctly. And they can challenge the election results. But some of the folks who are here have been waiting for about 3 hours to go inside. At some point, they were not allowed inside the building. We talked to a couple of women who are actually attorneys with the ACLU. They're going to try to get in to relieve the shifts of other attorneys who are there to monitor the counting process. They don't know why they're not being allowed inside. I talked to another couple of people, and they're simply volunteers. They found out about it, the need for them to be inside and help to count ballots. There's a group here that's a nonpartisan group here based in Michigan, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that says that they are here because when you think about the mass amount of absentee ballots here in Michigan and across the country, record numbers of mail-in ballots, but how can you count all of those with the same number of people you would actually employ or have as volunteers during a typical election? This is not your typical election. This is the most exceptional election in history. And so their conversation or their argument is that, listen, we need more people to come in and do the kinds of jobs and the duties that are required to have a safe election where every vote is counted. There are also peaceful demonstrators. There are people here chanting. There are people here praying. There are people here holding signs that say every vote counts. But there is a lot to this story, and it is a little bit complicated. But when you get to the heart of the matter, all the people here want to make sure that every vote is counted and every count is legitimate. Diane?
So, Adrian, just to be clear, the people who are there at the voting center, it doesn't seem to you like there's anything nefarious at play. They are coming because they want to help and they want to make sure everything is being done according to law. Did I understand that part right?
You are 100% right. This is one of the most peaceful organizations or demonstrations outside of this building. A lot of people have said they've made friends here, but everyone's saying, listen, we just want to do what's right. We just want every vote to be counted. We want this to be a clean election. However, a couple of people who didn't know each other here said to me that there was some word that thousands of ballots were delivered here overnight, like at 3 or 4 in the morning. I do not know the validity of that report, but people are saying that's what they saw and that's what they heard. They talked to someone who was inside. They've talked to people who were inside and then not allowed to go back in once they left to use the bathroom. I mean, you're just hearing these stories of things where it's like, what's going on? So there are questions that we need to continue to look into. And again, I've only been here on the ground in Michigan for a couple of hours, but as soon as I arrived, I was able to talk to these folks. Everyone just wants the right thing to be done.
Yeah, and you never know in the game of telephone when information is being relayed that way, what is true and what is being exaggerated or misunderstood. So, Adrian, we're glad you're there. We're glad you're on the ground now. We're going to let you go because we know you have a lot of work to do to try to figure out what's going on. But we appreciate you sharing with us what you've found out so far. It's all really interesting.
It's fascinating. Dana, I have to just say one more thing, that a lot of the folks out here, this is a volunteer duty. They've been out here for hours. And I said, are you going to leave? And they say, no, we can't leave with the hopes that maybe we'll be able to go inside. They need us. They need more people in here counting these ballots.
All right, people trying to do their civic duty. Adrian Banker, we appreciate you doing your duty today, friend. Thank you. And so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, but we have more ABC News Live continuing coverage of the 2020 presidential election after this.
Hey, I sent you a thank you for your hard work.
Sweet. What's Tango Card?
Rewards from Tango Card can be spent on hundreds of different gift cards.
That's weird. What a thoughtful gift.
I know. Tango Card, easy to get.
Awesome to receive.
Weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch. What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News
News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis, 18,000 tons of confidence. Ismail, David.
Ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see this home after home. They differentiate. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the 2020 presidential election. We're going to go straight to ABC's White House correspondent Rachel Scott, who's now in Wilmington, Delaware, right near Biden headquarters. Rachel, we heard from Kira a little while ago of what she was hearing from the Trump campaign. What are you hearing from the Bidens tonight?
Well, we saw Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris side by side today, and they are projecting confidence. They say that they believe that when all of the count is done, they will be victorious, that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. Joe Biden made clear that he is not declaring victory, but he said he is very confident with how these early results are coming in. And obviously that serves as a very stark contrast to what we are seeing from the president. And I don't think that really surprises anyone. I mean, these are two drastically different candidates. They have campaigned in different ways. They have two different visions for America. And at this point, the president is huddling with his advisors inside of the White House, and he is gearing up for a big fight. I mean, listen, he already is pushing for a recount in Wisconsin. The votes are still being counted. He's asking for a lawsuit in Michigan, another in Pennsylvania. We saw him speak last night at the White House after 2 a.m. in the morning. He is a president that declared just months ago that the only way that he will lose this election is if it is rigged. And so the president is gearing up for a fight, a legal battle. He wants a lot of
Looks like we've lost Rachel Scott. Rachel, do we have you?
Hey, can you still hear me?
Okay, you dropped off for a second, but you were saying that the president is preparing for a legal battle.
Yeah, the president is preparing for a legal battle. And I was listening to you talk to Adrian Bankert, who is in Michigan. I was there just this past weekend, and I was really struck by just how different these two candidates are. I spent some time at Biden's drive-in rally there in Detroit, talking to his supporters who were so concerned about the loss of life from the coronavirus. But almost everyone I talked to there said this election is about President Trump. They felt like this election was about getting President Trump out of office. It is something that I heard a lot from voters during the Democratic primary. They saw Joe Biden as the most electable candidate, and they're hoping that he goes to the White House, Diane.
You know, it seemed like in that statement that he made around 4 o'clock or so Eastern time, that Biden seemed to pick his words very carefully, as if he was kind of threading the needle. He said he's not declaring victory, but then said when the votes are counted, we think they will show that we won. And then he also went on to say that he is leading in the popular vote, and that if this election continues to expand the way they expect it to, that they're on track to win more votes than any ticket in history. So it seems like on the one hand, he's saying, you know, we're not counting our chickens yet, but on the other hand, we're feeling really good right now and like we made history tonight.
Exactly. And I think what they're trying to do is balance their message with the president of the United States, who is coming out and falsely declaring early victory, saying that he has already won this election when it has not been projected yet, when all of the votes are still being counted across the country. And so they have put out a message that they want every single vote counted. And so it's clear that they are feeling good, they are optimistic. But listen, this is not over just yet. We still have to hear from several states that are waiting to come in that could be game changers. But what we do know right now is that the path for President Trump back to the White House is much harder than it is for Joe Biden at this point. But again, if we have learned anything from 2020, it is to expect
all be waiting to see what happens, Diane.
That is for sure. But those legal challenges from the president at this point are not unexpected. Some of them have already started. He's promised, even overnight, he promised to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. So what is Team Biden doing to prepare for that? We heard Joe Biden say earlier, every vote must be counted. No one is going to take our democracy. But what specifically do you know what the campaign's doing in order to prepare for what might be a huge legal fight?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of ways the Biden campaign was bracing for something like this. There was reporting out just days ahead of the election that President Trump may declare an early victory. The president came out himself and said that he wasn't going to do that. We know that the Biden campaign has their legal advisors on hand here, but they also believe that the results are going to stand for themselves. And that's why they're driving home this message of making sure that every single vote is counted, because they believe that once all the results are in, once every vote is counted, if Joe Biden is ahead, that sends a very clear message to the American people that's going to be pretty hard for the president to compete with, regardless of whether or not he agrees with the results or whether or not he wants to win the election. The fact of the matter is the American people have to say at the end of the day here, and we're going to know pretty soon, hopefully, who the next president of the United States is going to be.
All right, Rachel Scott, our White House correspondent who has been working tirelessly. Rachel, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know you must be exhausted. No, I think we lost Rachel. Maybe she fell asleep right there on the phone with us. Let's check in now with ABC's Kira Phillips, who's in Washington, also working around the clock today. You made me laugh before. I made you laugh now, Kira. Take that.
Yes, you did. And you know what? That's probably exactly what happened. She hung up the phone and she went, time to take a quick nap before Diane calls me again.
Hopefully the viewers are getting a smile out of this too, and it's not just us that are going delirious. But Kira, if you can, just take...
Les gens qui arrivent dans la formation, jusqu'à tout le monde, les femmes dans les pays maintenant, les gens, comme vous devez en devenir, justement, pour le faire du business. C'est la raison pour laquelle je disais que lui qui fait sa formation, lui, tu vois, quand tu vas faire pour toi, il faut regarder comment il fait. Parce que quand tu cliques, tout le monde peut comprendre ce que l'on fait dans la formation. Tout le monde peut comprendre ce que l'on fait dans la formation. Par exemple, ici. Ce que tu dis quand tu as fait ta formation.
À partir de demain, j'écris ça. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. C'est possible.
Quand tu fais une formation, il y a deux processus. Pourquoi c'est lancé sur un processus? Tu vas m'expliquer aux gens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Surprising, as I've said before, that in this election, the returns are taking a little longer than we're used to. But that's actually a good sign. Part of the reason for that is because so many more people have voted. And it does mean that votes in Pennsylvania are actually being counted. We're taking the time to make sure that in this new system that went into place the end of last year, that all votes are being counted. Again, the vote is central to our democracy. It's how we all choose the people to be our public servants. This is the hiring process, the election. We have to have fair elections, and those elections have to be free of external influences. We need to have confidence that people are choosing their leaders, and that the leaders are not choosing the people who vote for them. We need to make sure that the voters are choosing the leaders, not the other way around. Elections are the bedrock of our democracy, and our commonwealth and our country thrive when people freely exercise this franchise. And that's why it's essential that every eligible vote is counted in this election and in every election. We've seen efforts across the country to undermine this election and to block the counting of votes. This afternoon, the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit to stop the counting of ballots in Pennsylvania. That is simply wrong. It goes against the most basic principles of our democracy. It takes away the right of every American citizen to cast their vote and to choose our leaders. Our elected officials at the state and local level should be free to do their jobs without fear, without intimidation, without tax. These attempts to subvert the democratic process are simply disgraceful. We're going to fight every single attempt to disenfranchise voters. We will continue to administer free and fair elections in Pennsylvania. Let me be clear, in Pennsylvania, every vote is going to count. I'm going to fight like hell to protect the vote of every Pennsylvanian. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that every counts. Because in Pennsylvania, every voice matters. Every vote matters. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Secretary of State, who's done a phenomenal job of making this election, I think, as smooth as any election I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of elections in Pennsylvania. Secretary of State Kathy Hochul.
Hi, everybody. It's got to stop meeting like this. Please soon. So thank you all for coming. And it was another really good day in Pennsylvania. Our amazing county election directors and personnel across the Commonwealth once again just put in incredible hours and time and energy and patience and attention to detail to make sure that they could proceed with counting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of ballots. They've made excellent progress. They're still working. Department of State are still working all back at our operations center. I'm going to be going back there after this, and we will be continuing to work into the night, all of us, to support the counties to get this done. So I expect, hundreds of thousands more probably to be counted still tonight. So you can keep watch on the Election Night Returns website. And at this point, I think we're actually probably a little bit ahead of where I thought we would be, which is great. So stay tuned. But still thinking, we're talking about a matter of days before the overwhelming majority of ballots are counted. I was thinking the other day, just a couple of days ago, was the 100th anniversary. We celebrated the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment this year. And so just a couple of days ago, November 2nd, was the 100th anniversary of the first election that those suffragists got to vote in. And I think when Governor Wolf was talking about how much we cherish and will fight for every voter's right to vote, I think about the suffragists, and it's really been an inspiration all year long to be in this position and to be working to make sure that every single voter of all backgrounds,
And I should say, you know, we had 100 years ago with the 19th Amendment, and then of course there were decades longer that voters of color were still denied the right to vote. And it took, you know, civil rights activists, the, you know, incredible struggles and tragedies and triumphs that led to President Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I take all of this with me every day in this job to make sure that we ensure that every single qualified and eligible voter has the opportunity to vote. And I'm so thankful to work for Governor Wolf, who is incredibly dedicated to that mission as well. So we will continue to fight for every Pennsylvanian for their vote to be counted. And thank you all for being here, and we're happy to take questions.
With the lawsuits that you just described, Governor Wolf, I mean, is it likely that this count will be shut down anytime soon? Is that possible?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what's possible, but I think if you're talking about the Trump lawsuit, one that Rudy Giuliani talked about, I think they were concerned about the lack of openness and transparency. Well, the Philadelphia that they're talking about has been streaming the processing of ballots, I think right from the start, from the pre-canvassing period. I mean, they can be live streamed on their website, so I guess you can get it, anybody can get it anywhere in the world. So I'm not sure how that it equals a lack of transparency. It seems to me it's never been more transparent than it is right now. I know, Kathy, you are a lawyer.
We can't comment on active litigation, but I can tell you that we will oppose every effort to at any point shut down the vote. We get to decide when the last vote is counted.
It sounds like it could. It sounds like you're not expecting this to result in any kind of order where you have to stop counting.
Again, I can't comment on what any court is going to do, but no, we don't have any anticipation that the vote count is going to stop. I think we'll continue until the last ballot is counted and every vote is going to have the opportunity to cast their vote.
If I could, they're also trying to stop counting of certain ballots. Including the ones that came in after yesterday, and then those ones that wound up being provisional because people were notified. My question is, do you have any estimate on how many ballots are at stake in those categories that you're trying to stop?
So, no, I mean, I think that, I'm not sure if you hear earlier, I think it was this morning that I was asked, and we really won't know the full scope of the universe of ballots until the canvas is finished. But I can tell you, I mean, for the late arriving ballots, I think it's actually, it seems to be so far a much lower number of late arriving ballots than what we saw in the primary. So, but again, it's anecdotal. I've only heard from a couple of counties, but one large counties from opposite ends of the state, it was both a very modest number of ballots. So that's good news. Yes, yeah, exactly, hundreds. Yeah. So it was great. I mean, obviously, I would rather nobody have, rather nobody fall into the category. And obviously, we're going to count every one of those ballots, as I've talked before. But it seems to be a very modest number. So.
Also, ability to, I know to some extent you can judge how many are still out there.
Are you talking about for the ballots arriving after November 3rd? Or are you talking about other things?
Mainly the ones that come in after November 3rd.
So, I mean, we'll track them day by day because the law that stands applies to ballots, that are cast by Election Day and received by 5 p.m. on November 6th. So it's a limited period of time that we'll be tracking, and we'll have those numbers as we go. Yes. Sorry, Governor.
For both of you, I would just like to know if you have specific responses to the president's sort of general accusations that elected officials here in other states are typically finding ballots for Vice President Joe Biden or any other candidate. Are you seeing any evidence of that?
No. I've been around for a lot of elections. In Pennsylvania, we have free, open elections, and the 67 counties, which is where these elections are administered, all across the state have been very open, very fair in the past, and so far, everything I've seen leads me to believe this election is no different.
So I want to take this opportunity to explain how mail-in and absentee ballots work in Pennsylvania, so that you can understand and everybody can understand that you couldn't find a box of ballots somewhere. So the way it works in Pennsylvania, we don't just send ballots to voters, you have to apply for it. So there's a record where you submitted an application, you've put in either your social security last four or your driver's license number, you've been checked against the PennDOT database or the social security database, before you even and against your voter record to make sure that you're actually registered and a qualified voter in the county. You put in your address, right, where you want the ballot mailed, before you ever even get a ballot. So then when you submit your ballot, you've sent it back, you've signed the outer declaration on the outer envelope, and when the county gets your ballot, they're looking at your name on that declaration, and they're again checking to make sure that you actually applied for that ballot and were approved. So that's all public record. There are lists of the voters who fall into these categories, and it's why we're able to track the numbers and how many were applied for, how many were cast. They're all only by eligible voters. So if you found a box of ballots in a room, they would have to match up with a list of people who actually were qualified voters who got approved. So it literally could not happen in Pennsylvania. You could not find ballots. They are all accounted for, and there are party representatives, candidate representatives permitted from every single candidate in every party to be in the room. As Governor Wolf was talking about, it has never been so transparent ever. You've got counties live streaming, you've got party and candidate representatives watching every step of that process. It's just not happening. There's no evidence of anything like what was alleged. Questions?
Eyes of the country obviously watching Pennsylvania, but you're both speaking very positively about the process so far. Is it fair to say you both expect, legally and otherwise, Pennsylvania's election system will hold up under scrutiny?
Yes. Yes.
Regarding the lawsuit, what is the timeline, the next steps that it would go through? And as counties have been separating the ballots that arrived late, in case they are not to be counted, will they be counted in the totals while we wait for a decision from this lawsuit?
So every ballot is going to be counted, and yes, they're all going to be segregated. So every one of those ballots will be counted by the counties, but they will keep those results segregated and the ballot segregated. I can't really speak yet for the time frame. We haven't been assigned a scheduling order, but once we do, we can provide that information.
Could I ask, would it go straight to the Supreme Court?
I probably. Yeah, if you're talking about the litigation where the Trump campaign is looking to intervene in the case that was already before the Supreme Court, yes. Okay, yes.
We've been talking about for months. We knew it was going to come down really to us in Pennsylvania. It's not a surprise to us, but it's kind of a loaded question. The whole nation that maybe is not understanding as much what we've known forever. Is there anything that you really want to address then? Because everybody's looking at us like, what's happening with Pennsylvania? Can you just give us kind of a brief explanation for why it is coming down to us?
It's not because we're the center of the universe. Governor, you want to take this one?
Thank you for asking the question. Pennsylvania is a big state. We have 20 electoral votes. Pennsylvania has always been an important state for elections, and it became especially important in the 2016 election when the Republican candidate actually won the 20 electoral votes. So people recognized right from the start that this is going to be a state that is really important for whoever ultimately wins the election, that they ought to really try everything to win Pennsylvania. In my mind, it's always been a very important state. We are the Keystone State, but in this election, it has a very large need in both campaigns.
I just think that some people might not understand why the process, like how come Michigan and Wisconsin, that they were able to get it done faster, and they're also key
Is there anything particular that you want to kind of let the average person know that might not know what we have known all along?
Yeah, well, there are a couple things, and I'm not sure that you can talk a little bit about this in Wisconsin and Michigan, but in Pennsylvania, you can't start counting ballots until the polls close at 8 p.m. Some places you can actually start to count early. In Pennsylvania, you can't even start to pre-canvass. That means you can't prepare mail-in ballots by opening the envelopes, smoothing them out, if there are wrinkles in them, to prepare them to be scanned at 8 p.m. You can't even start that process until 7 a.m. on election day. Other states have days before the election. As soon as the ballots come in, you can get them ready to be put into the scanner at whatever time you want to do that. So Pennsylvania has always had a late start on the counting process, and that has just been accelerated with more ballots coming in by mail. So I think that's the reason that this is taking more time. Frankly, very pleased with the 3 million ballots applied for by mail. We have a record registration. Over 9 million people registered to vote in Pennsylvania. That's the first time it's ever gone over 9 million. And so there's a whole confluence of things. A lot of people voting. The new election law in place. It went into place in 2000. It was passed in 2019. June 2nd was the very first election where we had the primary. And we have these unusual rules in Pennsylvania that we can't start to count until the polls close. So all those things have conspired to make the results come in a little later a couple days later than we normally get them. But again, keep in mind, this is not unusual in some cases. Military ballots have, I think in the election code, a week to come in. So they've always been counted late. It's just there haven't been as many absentee ballots coming in as there are right now in Pennsylvania. So did I cover everything?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yes.
Secretary, before this question is for you, elaborate a bit on the difference between voting systems. We've had a number of people contact us that are worried about their votes and we're looking through whether they'll be counted because the fact that, one polling place is saying to use black pins versus black markers. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So in Pennsylvania, when we mandated at the Department of State that every one of the 67 counties upgrade their voting systems to new voter verifiable paper trail security systems, we knew that we have a great Commonwealth. And in Pennsylvania, the counties have the authority to select among certified voting systems that the Department of State certifies. They actually have to be certified by both state and federal government. So we created new security standards and new accessibility standards, and we ended up certifying 5 different manufacturers, and really it ended up being probably between 20 and 25 different types of systems and configurations. And every one of them meets our security standards, our accessibility standards, and every component of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania statutes that they require for voting systems in Pennsylvania. So though they all look a little different and feel a little different, they all meet the highest standards of security and accessibility, and they all have a verifiable paper trail. So, and of course, every precinct in Pennsylvania is also mandated under federal law to provide an ADA accessible ballot marking device. Some counties allow all voters to use it, some try to limit it to voters with disabilities. Either way, those are all within the context of the law, and again, meet the highest standards of security and accessibility. So every voter, no matter how you vote, where you vote, you can have tremendous confidence that your vote is secure and your ballots will be counted accurately.
A little bit more here. Like, for instance, the Dominion system recommends that you use a black marker versus a black pin. There are voters who have reached out to us who said, oh, well, I was told that if you use a black marker for this system, it'll be thrown out.
No. So the type of pen is really about the ability for the scanner to read the ballot. So let's say you mark your circles, I don't know, with a red pen, which most systems work with black or blue. The Dominion system, like Montgomery County, tends to, say that black is better. It just is read better by the scanner. But if it's not read by the scanner, it will be read by person. So no ballot is rejected or not counted because of the wrong. As long as you filled in the circles, you haven't done things that would violate your vote, like, I don't know, putting X's through things and arrows and things that wouldn't constitute a vote, it doesn't matter. Your vote will be counted as long as they determine the voter's intent. Sure. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, that was the latest presser out of Pennsylvania. We heard from the governor there as well as the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania there, assuring the voters, the country, the candidates that everything in Pennsylvania is currently going according to law. No reason to suspect otherwise, and that they will continue until every vote is counted. Officials there were asked whether they think that a lawsuit brought by the Trump campaign could stop the voting from happening. They anticipate no, but let's check in with Kira Phillips again. Kira, what's your reaction to what you heard just now?
I'll tell you what stood out to me was Governor Tom Wolf saying he is going to fight like hell. And it's interesting. I mean, that's exactly what we heard from Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, right there in Pennsylvania just about an hour and a half ago, saying that they're going to do everything to make sure that all fraud is exposed, yet they have no evidence that any fraud took place in the election process. And so you were basically getting a response to what the Trump campaign is doing, and that is suing the state of Pennsylvania. And you heard Governor Tom Wolf say, he said the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit today to stop counting ballots. The governor saying that is wrong. Plain and simple, that is wrong. We will not shut down the vote and stop counting. We must be free to do our jobs without fear or attacks. I'm going to fight every attempt to disenfranchise voters. Every vote will count. He actually, he's referring to the Trump campaign, Diane, in that lawsuit, saying he will fight the Trump campaign with every attempt to disenfranchise voters, and that he's going to fight like hell to make sure every vote counts. And they say they'll keep going days. They will keep counting for days until every vote is counted. And just as they wrapped up that news conference, Diane, they were saying they were going back to the counting. So we shall continue. We'll follow it. We will indeed. All right, we're going to take a quick break now. Kira, thank you as always, and stay tuned for the latest from Nevada and more. ABC News live coverage of the 2020 presidential election. Lindsay Davis will keep things going with live coverage from the top battleground states across the country. Stay with us.
Stories of our time. Nightline.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day, where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times. That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that. You're on the ground. You're on 18,000. Hi, Ismael. David.
Ground zero from Hurricane Lake.
This is your view.
We know coronavirus has affected many of you. America has changed for now. There's no question.
George, we are thinking of you, Allie, and the kids.
How are you feeling? I feel fine, Robin. She wanted to share this message. You know, I'm feverish if I'm on television. Allie is now on the Roberts family prayer chain.
So grateful that we get to do this from home.
You do know you're sideways, right?
People are finding a way to come together.
We're going to get through this together. Right here with you on Good Morning America.
Friday nights, Central Air Pride, Cinematic, life drama, stunning, the unthinkable, follow the clues, the hunt, true crime, 2020, Friday nights, Central on ABC.
Hi, everyone. We have 4 minutes to go, so let's hang on for a couple minutes.
Another week in America, a country facing a new test now. We're on an airport, almost no one here. A little flight out of road.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle.
This is ground zero. It is shut down. The ambulance just pulled out. Now they're headed home.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind you. The first time tests have been done here.
Geico's whole 50 of these things. That came from me. My first idea was in 1/4 of an hour, your savings will tower, but there's no catch. So I thought 15 minutes, 15% serendipity.
Geico.
ABC News. Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to those compelling live video. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling. ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine celebrating epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind you?
Go there
Trying to
now.
put the fire out right now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw, live. No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
That's frightening.
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail. Only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it live on the scene. Maybe that's why in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Wow. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
verify and that updated results will be uploaded and to our website. We have our results dashboard that people can go and visit, but that will be updated every day to coming out.
Deanna, this is Gary Russell calling from Channel 8.
Hello, I can hear you. Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So, getting a bunch of calls today from people who say they have checked the Secretary of State's office and it does not indicate that their ballot or vote was A, passed or B, counted. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
I can. So I would suggest people go to our website and check there where you go to your my voter registration information. And it does depend on how they voted as well as to when that shows up and appears. So if somebody voted same day or did in person on election day, there is at least a 24-hour lag time and when that information gets updated. So that information may not be available today, but it most likely, hopefully, will be available tomorrow. The direct link to our information on our website is probably a little more timely for people to be able to check that. But again, it depends on how they voted. If somebody did a mail ballot and dropped off at a location, again, we're updating that information today, and we're processing those ballots. And we'll be processing ballots that were postmarked by election day, and we receive them in the office over the coming week. So that information, again, as soon as we receive it and are able to process it, it does get updated more quickly on our website than on the Secretary of State's website. Because again, we do a daily upload to them, and their information lags just a little bit on ours, but it will be available for people.
So I guess you would say that you have the information first, and then you're going to send it on to the Secretary of State's office for final tabulation, what have you. So there's going to be that lag time, maybe you group them or so forth, and then they go to the Secretary of State's office.
So yeah, we are a bottom-up system here in the state of Nevada. We get the information first, and then we actually transmit that to the Secretary of State's office for their statewide voter registration list. So information, we sometimes have it quicker into the Washoe County database a little bit faster, and the Secretary of State does get that, but it is a little bit of a lag time between when we provide that information and when the Secretary of State's office gets it from us, and we provide it as well.
Can I ask? I'll ask the question later. Go ahead.
Hi, Dana. This is Megan Messerly at the Nevada Independent. I just wanted to ask you, is Washoe County anticipating on posting any new results today?
No, not today. It'll be tomorrow morning. We'll be coordinating with the state and providing that information. We have nothing new that has been tallied today. Again, everything that was received yesterday as far as mail-in ballots. Again, we have over 9,000 ballots that we received from election day polling locations that we are going through the verification process and doing signature verification and making sure they're eligible to vote. And then we'll get those tallied so that the next update that we will have for any results as far as tally goes won't occur until tomorrow morning.
Hi, Deanna. This is Diego Garcia, reporter with Cola Wade. Question for you is, with the significant amounts of mail-in ballots that we've had, can you talk to us a little about the process? I mean, it's a little bit more challenging, more time-consuming for all of our election workers as they're trying to identify the vote and really make sure that these votes are verified?
It's been a different year for us. We've been doing absentee ballots for a long time. The volume is definitely something that we've never seen before in the state as far as receiving and processing mail-in ballots. There was also legislative change in 2019 that any ballot that has been voted and postmarked by election day and we receive within 7 days, that we still are going to be counting those their state, that those ballots will be cast. And it does really extend, and people were used to, usually on election night, the unofficial results didn't change much between the unofficial results and only the counts of the votes. That people about legislative change and us being required to accept those and count those ballots that are postmarked by election day and received within 7 days. That has changed the dynamics of when we can actually report what we would assume to be final official results. So that's something that's different. Not to mention all the other things that have happened this year. I mean, COVID and 19, and I mean, since the primary election and through this general election, we had to alter a lot of new mail-in ballots. Again, this is the most mail-in ballots that Washington County has ever seen. This is in our office. It's about 3 times as many ballots we have ever seen. Again, we've been doing ballots for a long time, but it's just the process does take some time. So it does take time to get those ballots in, make sure that we're scanning them in and attributing vote history to the appropriate voters that the ballot is associated with. And then again, doing the signature verification and making sure that those people are, that those ballots are eligible to be voted. So a little bit different this year, but it is expected for the future.
Hi, Tiana. This is Sam from AP. This morning, your office said results will be updated at 10 a.m. and now that's delayed till tomorrow. What happened on that expected schedule to change? And are you surprised?
So the 10 a.m. again was probably more of a communication error. Everything that we reported last night that was uploaded, there was no new results that came in the middle of the night when we were all asleep. So there was nothing to report at 10 a.m. this morning. That was the 10 a.m. updates are going to be, I guess, the best place. So we could have done a better job of clarifying when that would start. We weren't expected to do those updates today, again, because we reported everything that we have that had come in last night. There's no need to provide a supplement because there were no changes this morning. But every day from here on out, we will be reporting and updating those numbers every day by 10 a.m.
Tiana, your step of your day-to-day with the Secretary of State, which also expected a results update today.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure, I'm sorry. Can you take us through step-by-step of your day-to-day, including your communication with the Secretary of State, which also expected a results update today?
I mean, today, again, what we've been doing is we are opening and processing all mail-in ballots that we received on election day through the drop-off locations and at the polling locations. They're working on importing those into our system, doing signature verification, and actually opening those ballots and getting them prepped for tally. My communication with the Secretary of State's office has just been communicating on coordinating our results, uploads. I have talked to them several times today, and again, we have nothing new to report in Washington County. They, of course, can, if they have updated results from other counties, that's up to, I don't know if they have scheduled for when they're going to update that information or when they might do so. But for Washington County, we don't have anything to update to them until tomorrow.
Hi, it's Tony, and I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, were you surprised when the Secretary of State's office said they wouldn't have anything until Thursday morning, and now it seems like they are going to have a little something? And the GOP put out a press release saying that they've gotten thousands of complaints. Have you heard of any of those complaints?
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Jump in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on. Dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them. You'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
of democracy right now. Chant poll workers to prevent votes from being counted in Detroit. Both political parties hit the maximum of 134 challengers admitted inside the TCF Center there in the Motor City. Not long after this, ABC News projected Biden the winner of Michigan. The Trump campaign announcing a lawsuit will be filed. The path to victory hitting a fork in the road. 270 electoral votes. Trump and Biden campaigns with their collective eyes on the prize. But who really has the better shot tonight? States in play, major movement in the upper Midwest today before Biden's big win in Michigan. The votes coming into Wisconsin, putting the former vice president over the top there as well. The counts for the other battlegrounds still coming in. Too close to call Arizona and Nevada in the west, Georgia and North Carolina in the south, and of course the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. President Trump casting doubt, taking legal action, trying to stop the count, tweeting to quote, hereby claim certain states' electoral votes after baselessly declaring victory overnight. The president threatening to go to the Supreme Court. Joe Biden calling for calm and patience, saying he believes he's on track to win this election. And the big picture, taking a step back from the horse race to take the temperature of our nation. What did we learn from 2020 about voter enthusiasm? Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Well, after a long 24 hours for an already tense nation, as the American people wait to learn who will be the next president of the United States, there are several takeaways. Among them, after this country has endured a grueling pandemic, an economic downturn, and racial unrest, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. Divided we stand. Razor-thin margins separate President Trump and former Vice President Biden in multiple battleground states as they finish the process of counting every vote in this unprecedented election. And as of this hour, here's where the race stands. Joe Biden leads the popular vote by just over 3 million votes. And in the all-important Electoral College, Biden is currently winning 22 states with 253 electoral votes. President Trump is currently winning 23 states with 214 electoral votes. The Biden campaign with some big wins in the Midwest. ABC News projects the vice president will win the state of Michigan. And with 100% of the precincts reporting in Wisconsin tonight, ABC News can now characterize Joe Biden as the apparent winner in Wisconsin. Still a very close race there, but Biden appears to be winning by nearly the same margin that the president won the state 4 years ago. But in 5 states, the race is still too close to call. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Those states hold the key to the White House, and both campaigns are digging in for a fight. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris appeared late today, expressing confidence in having a clear path to victory once all the votes are counted. Meanwhile, late last night, President Trump prematurely declared victory, and his campaign is now launching a legal fight to try to stop the vote count in several states. Lots to get into tonight. ABC's Mary Bruce leads us off.
Tonight, a confident Joe Biden with Kamala Harris by his side, declaring victory is within his reach.
I'm not here to declare that we won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be winners.
Biden says he's ahead in Wisconsin, ahead in Michigan, confident he flipped Arizona, and feeling good about Pennsylvania. And he added this.
Of special significance to me is that we won with the majority of the American people. Indeed, Senator Harris and I are on track to win more votes than any ticket in the history of this country.
Overnight, just after midnight, Biden telling supporters to keep the faith.
We're going to have to be patient, and it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
Today, promising their votes matter.
Every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. Not now, not ever. We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender.
Biden's legal team says they're prepared for whatever the president's lawyers throw at them. Looking ahead, Biden says he's ready to start uniting the country after this bitter campaign.
I know this won't be easy. I'm not naive, but I also know this as well. To make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies. We are not enemies. What brings us together as Americans is so much stronger than anything that can tear us apart.
And if If Biden can also take Arizona and Nevada, that is enough to deliver him the White House. But tonight they are also feeling confident about their chances in Pennsylvania, too. And while Biden's team is being very cautious not to declare victory, they are tonight moving ahead with their transition plans, already launching their new transition website, buildbackbetter.com. Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Mary. President Trump was behind closed doors in the White House today planning his next steps. He came before cameras after 2 a.m. this morning, prematurely declaring we already have won it, despite millions of votes still left to be counted. Today, his campaign is trying to take the battle over finishing the count to the courts. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
Tonight, President Trump is huddled with aides inside the White House getting ready for a fight. His team has already filed a lawsuit in Michigan, another in Pennsylvania, and demanded a recount in Wisconsin. All his votes are still being counted. Late election night, the president was defiant, speaking at the White House after 2 a.m., falsely declaring the election was rigged, the race was over, and that he had won.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
In fact, the election went smoothly, without significant disruptions, and millions of votes are still being counted. In some states, as expected, the count is taking a little longer due to the dramatic increase in mail-in voting during the pandemic. Today, even the Senate Majority Leader, Republican Mitch McConnell, took issue with the president's words.
Claiming you win the election is different from finishing the counting.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio was more blunt, tweeting, "Taking days to count legally cast votes is not fraud." Today, the president's team filed suit in Michigan. They have not been provided meaningful access to several counting locations, though they made no allegation the vote was tainted. They are also demanding a recount in Wisconsin, though they trail by some 20,000 votes, and election officials there say everything has been counted.
Jonathan Karl joins us now. John, so you reported on those lawsuits in Michigan and Wisconsin there, and the Trump campaign is also taking action in Pennsylvania, where they're currently ahead. Explain what they're trying to do there.
Well, essentially, Lindsay, it seems to really boil down to this, and that is stopping the count in places where Donald Trump has the lead. Pennsylvania, there's also talk of something, legal action in Georgia as well, and then continuing the count or pushing for a recount in the places where he's behind. So that's Wisconsin, the recount, and continuing the count in Nevada and Arizona, where they both, the campaign claims that they will ultimately emerge as in the lead. So, count where you need the votes, stop counting where you already have the votes, essentially.
And just give us a sense of what you're hearing from the campaign on their strategy as far as going forward. Do they think that any of this can change the result, and how long do they plan to keep up the fight?
Well, I think to understand the strategy, you have to take your cue directly from the president himself. And a short while ago, he actually tweeted about his legal team's efforts, saying, "What's the point? They're manufacturing votes already. It's too late." Well, the president's strategy, if that's the word to use, seems to be to basically create doubt about the integrity of the election itself, which seems to be a reflection that he believes that if all the counting goes on to conclusion, that he will not emerge in the lead. We will not have won. So his plan, it seems, is just his chaos, is just to say that this whole election was, to use a word that he's been using for many years, rigged.
Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you. And turning now to Pennsylvania. Tonight, Donald Trump is winning by 5%, but it's a margin that has been cut in half since this morning, and there is still a significant portion of votes to come in from Democratic strongholds in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Let's go now to our Trevor Ault, who is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where the governor talked a short time ago. Trevor, I understand that officials are preaching patience tonight as the results continue to come in.
Well, they definitely are, Lindsay. I can tell you that the Secretary of State said earlier today that the vote has actually been counted a little bit faster than they were anticipating, but so it's going to take a couple more days before the count here is finalized in Pennsylvania. You said that Right now, President Trump does have a lead, although it is shrinking. It's enough that he himself has already declared himself the victor of Pennsylvania, and you shouldn't write off the fact that he has a lead. It's now, you said 5%. It just recently, on our last update, has shrunk to 4%. And the reason that this has not been called in President Trump's favor is because the number of votes that are left out substantially play to the benefit of former Vice President Joe Biden. There are about 1 million or so votes left to be counted. The overwhelming majority, about 97% of them, are mail-in ballots. And statewide in Pennsylvania right now, 65% of mail-in ballots have been registered Democrats. This afternoon, President Trump had a lead of about 460,000. Now it's down to 256,000 as the vote tally went up from 80 to 86%. There's still 14% left to go. There is plenty of space for former Vice President Biden to make up that gap and even take the lead here in Pennsylvania. But it is going to be possibly very narrow, Lindsay, because as I mentioned, of the mail-in ballots, former Vice President Biden has received, or 65% of the mail-in ballots are registered Democrats. He is going to need, if he passes President Trump, about 64% of the remaining votes. So this was always going to be essentially where this election was going to end up, Lindsay. We're just seeing it play out, and it certainly is not going very quickly.
But if Biden is able to get Arizona and Nevada, he potentially wouldn't need Pennsylvania, but we'll see how the rest of that shakes out. Trevor, at that press conference, what was Governor Tom Wolf's response to the legal challenge that the president's team is making in Pennsylvania?
Well, he addressed it on a number of fronts, Lindsay, because there have already been several lawsuits filed about the election counting and the election results here in Pennsylvania. One lawsuit specifically from the Trump campaign is calling for ballot counting to halt right now because they say there's not enough transparency, that the Republican poll watchers aren't being allowed close enough to the ballot counters, so they want it to stop until there's transparency. Governor Tom Wolf called that simply wrong, and the Secretary of State said this is the most transparent election that they have ever had. They defended it in every sense of the process so far, and they were very confident in what they're doing, whether or not it's going to take a few days to finalize that tally. Another area, another lawsuit that is playing out is that the Trump campaign wants votes, mail-in votes that were received after Election Day, even though they were postmarked before Election Day. They want them thrown out, which could be decided by the Supreme Court. What the Secretary of State revealed this evening is that today they received hundreds of those, but it appeared to indicate less than 1,000, which is, on a state scale, not a lot of those votes. And while the state will likely be decided by very narrow margins, the margin probably won't be that thin to the point where that lawsuit would be the tipping point either way. But in a more broad sense, Lindsay, addressing some of those claims that we heard from John Carl, the president, talking about ballots being manufactured or election officials finding ballots for Biden, they dismissed all that. They said with the system they have in place, it's really not even possible. And when I asked them point blank, will the Pennsylvania election system hold up under scrutiny legally and otherwise, they said bluntly, yes.
Trevor Old, our thanks to you. We'll be sure to continue to check back in with you later as those votes continue to come in. And in Michigan, ABC News is now projecting that former Vice President Joe Biden will win that race. Here's a look at the current vote tally right now, 16 electoral votes at stake. Now, this is a state that President Trump won narrowly in 2016, and now his legal team claims that they plan on filing a suit to challenge the results. Let's bring in Adrian Bankert, who's on the ground. Adrian, throughout the day, Biden expanded his lead. Tell us how that happened.
You know, it really ends up being about absentee ballots, right? All of the mail-in ballots. I just talked to an official inside because we're actually at the ballot counting location here in Detroit. We went inside, we saw people counting their ballots. Here's the deal. They have had such a record turnout, and I asked specifically about the timeline. They, of course, have been counting since yesterday morning. People were able to drop off their absentee ballots to the clerk's office up until 8 last night. And so those ballots would then have to be delivered to the counting location, like this one right here. But really, it is about the guessing game as to, you know, how did Biden win over so many Michigan voters? Some counties actually selecting Trump over Biden here in the state. Of course, the Trump campaign, as we've been talking about, is contesting the validity of how these ballots are counted. So much so
then
they are
we're gonna
filing a
take a
lawsuit.
shower and eat
But the president's legal team is filing a legal challenge. Where do they see an issue, and what are experts on the
Yeah,
ground
we're gonna go
telling?
sit quickly. We're gonna take a shower.
Here's
We're
the
gonna
deal.
eat oatmeal
They
and
don't
we're gonna
think
go
they
sit
have
quickly,
seen
okay?
meaningful access
We're
to
going
the
to
ballot
sit
count.
quickly.
We talked to a number of people behind the
So-
scene, and actually, Lindsay, I'm sure
So
hear
when we
that
finish
music,
oatmeal,
that chanting.
we
There's a
take
group
shower,
of
we eat, and we go sit
vigils.
quickly.
Yeah, holding
Okay,
vigil
baby.
here. They are singing.
No oatmeal?
There have been peaceful
Do you want
demonstrators
me to
holding
leave the
signs and
oatmeal?
count every vote.
No oatmeal?
The Trump campaign says
Let me-
that there
let
are
me see,
workers or volunteers who were able to be an accountability
Okay,
to the vote
so mommy gonna
not
eat
allowed
oatmeal.
inside the
You
building.
say no
And
for you.
when we arrived here, there were people who told us, people from the ACLU, people from nonpartisan, nonprofit organizations, and volunteers who said they were not allowed in this building. They were blocked from entering. Again, they didn't really know why they were blocked from entering, and from what I've gathered, I understand that that is the premise of this lawsuit, these legal filings. The Trump campaign believes that they are not, Michigan is not allowing people to come in and actually challenge the election results or watch, monitor the counting of those ballots.
Adrian Bankert on the ground for us in Michigan. Thanks so much, Adrian. Joe Biden is now hoping to close out the race by reaching 270 electoral votes. So for the latest look at the map and the path to 270, let's turn to ABC's Tom Yamas. Tom, give us a look at the big board right now.
Lindsay, good evening. Great to be with you tonight. So let's dig into Pennsylvania right now. This is the major battleground that we're looking at right now. I'm going to blow this up right here. We're having a little technical difficulty with this IFB, so I'm going to toss it away because I was hearing myself. All right, let's blow this up right here. So right now, President Trump has a lead, and it's 277,000 votes. You think that's a pretty commanding lead, and it is. But the problem for the president is that there's still about 1 million ballots that are still outstanding. So the question becomes, where are these ballots coming from? They're coming from all over the state. They're mail-in ballots. But the problem for the president is that they're coming from blue areas, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the
Baby, hold
suburbs.
on.
We do have a sense of the early vote, how it's trending, the mail-in vote, and it's favoring Joe Biden 3-1. That's why Joe Biden and his campaign feels confident about Pennsylvania at this hour. Let's go down south right now. So North Carolina, both campaigns are still trying to win North Carolina. President Trump is on top. He still has the lead there. Let's dig in a little deeper on Georgia because the margin here is razor thin. So at this hour, and I want to stress these numbers are changing minute by
being characterized by ABC News as the apparent winner in Wisconsin. Our Alex Perez is there with all the details. Good evening, Alex. Walk us back through this dramatic day there.
Yeah, sure, Lindsay. Once again, down to the wire here in Wisconsin, a position they are familiar with here in this state. Now, as most people went to bed last night, it appeared that President Trump had a somewhat significant lead here, about 100,000 votes. But in the overnight hours, that's when we saw the votes from some of the blue core areas in the state begin to be tabulated. So we're talking about Milwaukee County, where Milwaukee is, Dane County, where Madison is, or the Green Bay area and other parts of the state. Those votes started to come in, and that margin began to narrow. And as we saw today, with 99% of the vote now in, Biden is up by about 20,000 votes. Now, interesting to note here, Lindsay, we've been doing some analysis of some of the counties here, and there were 23 counties here in Wisconsin that went from Obama to Trump back in 2016, and he kept most of those. 21 of those counties still went to Trump, but the overall turnout for Vice President Biden here in Wisconsin was just simply enough that it put him in the lead. He's ahead by 20,000 votes here. So what happens next here is that officials move to certify the vote, and that's a process that begins usually in about the first week of December. But President Trump has already made it clear that they are not done with the state of Wisconsin. He says they will seek a recount here in this state. Now, the president also made several allegations about the vote process here, saying that, as he did in Pennsylvania, that ballots were coming out of nowhere. They weren't properly tabulated. Election officials here, the election director, Megan Wolf, took issue with all of that. She said there is a process in place. This is not their first presidential election, and she knows that every stage, every part of the process was followed properly here. If the president would like a recount, that she says the state is prepared to do that, but she is confident that everything worked out here the way it was supposed to work. Lindsay?
So we know the Trump campaign is exploring a recount there, even though he won by a similar margin in 2016. What could those scenarios ultimately look like?
Yeah, Lindsay, so that means that things would go even a little longer. So that recount wouldn't be allowed to begin until after that certification process happens that I mentioned, and that happens about the first week of December, and the recount would take probably about 10 days, more or less, but state officials here saying if that's what the president would like, he's entitled to, because the margin here is less than 1%. ABC says it's about 0.5% here, the margin, the difference between the votes here. So if the president would like that, the state says they are prepared to do that, but that, of course, is going to drag all of this in until December. But right now, as you mentioned, with 99% of the vote, ABC News here calling Joe Biden the apparent winner in Wisconsin. Lindsay?
Alex Perez, our thanks to you. And now let's go to Georgia, where Donald Trump is ahead by roughly 57,000 votes, and more votes could be coming later tonight from in and around the Democratic stronghold. Let's bring in our Steve Sami, who is there. Steve, bring us up to speed. The Democrat hasn't carried Georgia since 1992. How many votes are left to count, and can Joe Biden close this gap there?
So it is mathematically possible. And if you had asked me this question earlier this morning, I would have told you that it wasn't. So right now, the spread between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is somewhere between 50 and 55,000 votes. The Secretary of State earlier today was estimating that there were a couple 100,000 outstanding votes, but what we've learned from the counties is it's probably not that high. In fact, our estimate is somewhere between 100 and 150,000 votes. But the key is where those votes are from. Fulton County is reporting at least 68,000 outstanding absentee votes that they are still counting. And this is the largest county in the state, a county that breaks for the Democrat about 6-4.
You want to open the door?
In DeKalb County, the county where I happen to live, which is a majority black county, the break is even better for Joe Biden. It's more like 8-2. And in that county, Joe Biden they're actually counting about 20,000 votes, they tell us, and they're going to be counting those votes through the night. So when you crunch all the numbers, it is absolutely mathematically possible that Joe Biden could win here in Georgia, though the math and the vote generally favors the president here. All eyes are going to be on these blue counties that are counting votes and seeing if there are actually enough votes to make up the difference. There's also something else out there. We're hearing reports of absentee votes in the Savannah area. The election supervisors there haven't really given us much information, but if there are additional absentee votes to be counted in that area,
it makes it even more possible, and I use the word possible, that Joe Biden could actually do something in this state that Obama wasn't able to do twice, and that is win the state of Georgia.
And Steve, of course, it's not just the presidential race that's outstanding there in Georgia. Talk us through these two Senate races.
So the two Senate races are very interesting, especially in contrast with the race for president. Jon Ossoff, who many thought had a good chance against incumbent Senator David Perdue, is losing by about 150,000 votes. In fact, the spread in that race is significantly, in the context of things, greater than the difference between Joe Biden and the president, which is quite interesting because Ossoff, by most accounts, ran a good race where he put the senator on the defensive on a number of issues. In the other race, Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, and Kelly Loeffler, the incumbent Democrat, Republican, are headed to a runoff that will take place in January. Neither of them were able to get the 50% needed to win. And in Georgia, in a race like this that will happen in January, the Republican
hold on. Let me fix something here.
Likely going to win that race, and that is Loeffler.
Steve Osunsami, our thanks to you. And now to the West Coast, where all eyes are on Arizona tonight. Joe Biden is up by roughly 93,000 votes, but another round of votes from the all-important Maricopa County will be released this evening. Whit Johnson is in Phoenix. Whit, I know you've been working about 24 hours straight. Just change the tie and keep on going. Bring us up to speed on the latest situation there.
That's right, Lindsay. Who's counting the time, though? It's exciting. There's a lot going on across the country, and especially right here in Arizona and Maricopa County. You talked about some of those outstanding votes. Specifically, we're talking about in Maricopa County absentee ballots that voters brought to the polls in person on Election Day or over the weekend prior. Now, this is different from the early voting where people sent those in because those were tabulated about 2 weeks in advance. So we're looking at 600,000, maybe even more outstanding ballots here in the state of Arizona, which could potentially swing things. We have seen Donald Trump getting closer and closer, inching and narrowing that lead that is currently possessed by Joe Biden. But right now, the Democrats are confident. They're hanging on. We do expect to start getting some of those results from those absentee ballots from here in Maricopa County later on tonight. Lindsay.
And with ABC News projecting Joe Biden will win Michigan and as the apparent winner in Wisconsin, Arizona may be Donald Trump's best chance at getting to 270 electoral votes still. So you talked about how the Democrats are feeling. How are Republicans that you're talking to feeling tonight about their chances?
Republicans are urging caution. They're pumping the brakes. They don't want anybody to jump to conclusions, and they're also conducting some mathematical gymnastics here. They are looking at all of these scenarios in a really different light to see if there is still a path to victory. And I can tell you, Trump campaign officials at one point during the day, even though we knew the spread of the votes that were still out there and outstanding, they suggested that they thought Donald Trump could still come back and beat Joe Biden by as many as 30,000 votes. And their reasoning behind it is they believe that on Election Day, the people who came in to vote would outnumber the Biden voters by a ratio of 4 to 1. But it's important to point out that these votes that we're looking at right now are different. They're the absentee ballots. And even though people may have dropped them off in person on Election Day, Democrats still insist that they had the edge among those who were receiving the absentee ballots. So it depends on who you ask. Republicans are still firm. They believe that they have a path, and they have said that they will win Arizona. But it is too close to call. We have seen that lead narrow and narrow, but still, Donald Trump would need to have a really good result from those remaining ballots here in Maricopa County, which has been leaning towards Joe Biden in order to win this race. Lindsay.
Whit Johnson, thanks so much. And Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs talked with our Diane Macedo a short time ago. Here's the very latest on the status of the outstanding votes there.
Well, we are absolutely focused right now on making sure that every single ballot is counted. There are around 600,000 votes still to be counted in Arizona. we have folks at the tabulation centers in every county working on that right now. And in terms of security, there are party observers allowed in to watch that process. Additionally, all of the tabulation centers have cameras, and so anyone can go to the county elections website in any county and watch that process as it happens while it's happening. So a lot of security there. We are really focused right now on getting these votes counted, and hopefully we'll know more tonight where we stand. Maricopa County is obviously the largest county in Arizona, 2/3 of the voting population, and there'll be 400,000 of those outstanding ballots are in Maricopa, and they'll be releasing a lot more totals this evening.
Now, for the Maricopa County Recorder, there are over 400,000 ballots to be counted, over 160,000 absentee ballots dropped off at the polls yesterday. Any expectations on how this will impact the overall vote, and how challenging has it been to deal with this level of mail-in ballots?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. But I think that, in 2018, we had 4 races that were, Republicans were ahead on election night. And when we started counting these early ballots after election day, those 4 races swung to the Democratic candidate, my race included. Certainly there is a lot of scrutiny on Arizona, and we are focused on getting this right. As I mentioned, people can watch this process on the cameras, and we are working diligently to get it done.
And now for a broader look at what these election results all mean, we bring in ABC News political analyst Matt Dowd. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt, after a long, sleepless night. Many Democrats, as well as pollsters, were predicting a decisive blue wave that really didn't come to pass. So what happened?
Well, it's first of all, the polling is going to need to be examined. They had an average Joe Biden lead of about 8 points. Joe Biden is going to end up winning it by about 4 when all the votes are counted. That's my calculation, by about 4%. He's going to end up getting more votes than anybody else has run for president. But the interesting thing, Lindsay, is Donald Trump is going to end up getting the second most votes anybody has ever gotten as president. He's probably going to go past 70 million people that are going to vote for him. So he increased his support. So what happened on election day was there was an underestimate of the number of Donald Trump supporters out there. And when that happened, it brought the race much closer. It brought the race from an 8-point race to a 4-point race.
How divided is America right now? I mean, I guess perhaps if you could put it in some kind of historical context. And what does it mean for governing in the years ahead?
Well, to me, we're as divided as we were since 1860. I think that's where we are. When the run up to when the Civil War happened, Abraham Lincoln's election, which was very contested. Abraham Lincoln won that election in 1860 with 40% of the vote. He barely won that election in 1860. And so I think as a country, because of how people have lined up and where they are in this country and the level of frustration and anger in some instances and distrust of each side, that where we're at, we are as divided as we've been in 160 years.
And President Trump ran a divisive campaign, and his first term was certainly polarizing, but he appears to have really expanded his base considerably. This as the Democrats lost seats in the House. Should Democrats be concerned?
Yeah, if I were the Democrats, I mean, even if Joe Biden, which it looks like if everything goes according to what we think, he's going to get elected president, but the Republicans will have kept the Senate, and there's still some unknowns. The Republicans will have picked up seats in the House. I think the Democrats should be concerned. They're losing in places they used to win. They're not winning by as big a margins as they used to do in blue areas. So, I mean, this is a divided country. They may end up winning the presidency in this instance and keeping the House. But this thing's on a razor edge in who's got the lead in the country today. And it's exceedingly close in every election.
And Matt, of course, you've been a Republican strategist. What shifts have you seen in the base of the Republican Party in recent years? And what would you say that it looks like in 2020?
To me, watching this over the last 10 or 15 years, the Republican Party has now become much more the party of the white working class in America. And the white working class in America used to be the Democratic base. It used to be, people used to talk about the Republicans being, the country club, chamber of commerce types. It's no longer that. It's the white working class. It's rural America that used to be Democratic. And the Republicans used to own the suburbs, and now they don't. And they're more small town, they're more ex-urban. It's a big dramatic shift, and there's been geographical shifts too. The Republicans used to have a big base in the Northeast and the West. They no longer have that. Democrats used to have a base in the South. They no longer have that. The Midwest has always traditionally been a battleground, but the Republicans are coming on strong. So it's a fundamentally different, the GOP is a fundamentally different political party when you look at its base than it was 15 years ago.
Now, two states the Democrats thought that they could flip, Texas and Florida, stayed in the Republican column. Should Democrats give up pretty much on these states, or do you think that there is a shift taking place?
Well, I would look at them each differently, Lindsay. I think Texas is moving towards the Democrats. It's slow. Mitt Romney won it by 16. In 2012, Donald Trump won it by 9. In 2016, Donald Trump won it by 6 this Tuesday. So it's slowly moving towards the Democrats. Florida is going in the opposite direction. And so Florida is going from a state that Democrats can really compete in, but it's more and more and more off from the national number that Democrats get. So Democrats win nationally by 4, and now they lose Florida by 3. That's a 7-point differential between the state and that. And so if I were the Democrats, I would stop investing or invest much less money and resources and man and woman power in Florida and direct it to states like Texas, Arizona, and Nevada, because that's where the Democratic Party is emerging while it's getting closed out in places like Florida.
Matt, certainly some really helpful insight there. Thanks so much as always. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime. Voters in 6 states have now given their green light for legal marijuana. More on that and the other items on the ballot that you may not be aware of. Hurricane Eta wreaked havoc in Central America. Now forecasters say it may have Florida in its sights. We're keeping an eye on that storm. But first, our tweet of the day. Former Wisconsin Republican Governor Scott Walker on how hard it may be for President Trump to get a victory in the Badger State if he asks for a recount.
2020 was different, to say the least. We had virtual dance parties and ordered takeout feasts. But before we give 2020 last looks, hold on to those memories with photo books. Find the good and let it fly at shutterfly.com.
You ready for shower?
Their
Not
just
yet?
is no equivalency to the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you.
Comey, how strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that you can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying.
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington. A very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News. Straightforward. Right now, with so much at stake, ABC News. With the straightforward, real-time answers, real-time results. What you need to know. With the most powerful and trusted team in politics. The breaking new ABC News special. Tonight at 10/9 Central on ABC.
Another week in America, a country facing a new test now.
Wuhan Airport, almost no one here.
A lost flight out of Rome.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle.
This is
Ground zero.
It is shut down.
Another ambulance just pulled out.
Now they're headed to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind you.
The first time tests have been done here.
Afternoon, evening, late night, 24/7. ABC News. There for you. Friday night.
I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill raced up my spine. I just shook the hand of a killer. Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Josh, did you kill your wife?
Now the stunning new 2020 event Friday on ABC.
Welcome back, everybody. While we're keeping a close eye on the presidential and congressional races, we also wanted to take a look by the numbers at some other 2020 election results. Democrats were hoping for a blue wave in state houses, but only 4 chambers flipped last night, the lowest number since 1946. So it stands at about 60% of the nation's state house chambers are controlled by Republicans and only 40% by Democrats. Voters passed at least 76 statewide ballot measures. They include all 6 marijuana measures, including the legalization of recreational marijuana in Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota. Plus, one state, Oregon, that voted to decriminalize possession of small amounts of all drugs, including cocaine and heroin. Florida will raise its state minimum wage to $15 an hour in the coming years. And Colorado became the first state to approve paid family and medical leave through a ballot measure. Meanwhile, 58% of California voters sided with Uber, Lyft, and other app-based ride shares and delivery services to classify drivers as independent contractors who are not eligible for the benefits and job protections.
You go shower very quick, baby.
And we still have lots to get to here on Climate Update on the election cliffhanger that's unfolding, the latest from the Biden and Trump campaigns. The Trump campaign says that they will sue to stop the count in Michigan. It's one of several suits that they claim that they have launched. Could these challenges influence the outcomes of the races? But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
abcnews.com.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Let me see this.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the high wall. This procession of migrants goes back to miles.
There is going to be catastrophic
Baby,
damage.
push.
Fire has made a run. You can see those
Baby,
flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on
So many can say.
red carpet.
Thank you. Thank you. Really nice, baby.
Watch movies is on location for Facebook Watch.
My turn too.
Quite a fascination with criminal trials. Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know
Dad, you know Daddy coming? We have to take shower before Daddy coming. If not, Daddy's gonna give you shower.
The truth is going to be difficult to find. Unless you
So
try to find
cherche le problème. Bonjour bébé. Say bonjour. Bonjour bébé. Comment ça va? Ça va bien? Ça va bien? Ça va bien? Ça va bien? Alexa. Say Alexa. Excellent. Alexa, excellent.
It's a race to the finish line, and the margin still razor thin.
Two huge developments as Joe Biden is now the apparent winner in both Michigan and Wisconsin.
So that means there are now 5 states and millions of absentee ballots, and what is likely to be a bevy of lawsuits that will determine who occupies the White House for the next 4 years.
Joe Biden addressing the nation this evening, not declaring victory, but saying he's confident he will win once the votes are counted.
We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends,
You don't want mommy to see that, right?
will emerge victorious.
The Trump campaign, meanwhile, doubling down without evidence on cheating claims. Eric Trump saying the campaign plans to challenge the extended Pennsylvania vote count in court. Guys, this is fraud. This is absolute fraud. We met with all our lawyers. We are going to file suit in Pennsylvania. President Trump, however, again casting doubt on the election's integrity without evidence, demanding that no more votes be counted.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay?
Legal experts say the president can't stop the vote counting, and state officials are promising to count every valid vote.
An internal HHS memo obtained by ABC News shows new coronavirus cases increased 19% from the week before.
This is another critical moment for action, another critical moment for leaders to step up.
That memo also says medical facilities in Utah are reaching a breaking point, and that doctors may have to start prioritizing care for patients based on age and condition.
Wear the mask. Wear it.
Really?
It's not for you.
Where is the remote? Go get the remote.
My mom was gone in 24 hours.
Go get it and give it to mommy. Go.
With an average of 80,000 new cases reported daily,
Baby.
according to the COVID tracking project.
Where's the
Experts
remote?
say it may be a good idea to quarantine if you vote
It's
at
where?
the polls in a hotspot.
Go get it and give it to me, please.
Tropical storm
Go.
Ida back out in the Caribbean after giving Nicaragua a beating. Forecasters say it could reform as a hurricane out over open water and could be a threat to Florida early next week.
Some normality returning today to the Austrian capital of Vienna as officials continue to investigate the terror attack that killed 4 and left more than 20 hurt.
Government officials now say
You know
a
what
lone
we get
gunman
from
was
us.
behind the attack and that
Go.
intelligence on him was fumbled months ago.
Where is the remote?
Killed by police
Go
with
find the
a
remote. I need the remote.
firearm.
Where
Crowded
did you
bars
leave
with
it?
a 20-year-old with dual Austrian and North Macedonian citizenship. Back in July, intelligence officials in Slovakia handed over information
Let's go
suggesting
shower.
the attacker had tried
Let's
and
go shower
failed to
real quick
buy
and
ammunition
finish.
there.
Let's go
Government
find
officials
his
are now
towel.
looking
Do you know where you
into
left
checks
his towel?
made on him and if they were in line
Moving.
with the law.
No.
As of today,
Where
the
is your
United
pink
States is
towel?
officially out of the Paris Climate
Since this
Agreement.
morning,
President Trump announced
let's go
3
find
years
your
ago
towel.
he was
Go
pulling
see.
the U.S. out, but due to United Nations rules, it took until today for the United States to officially extricate itself.
Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, says that he will go back into the Paris Accords if he becomes president.
Welcome back. President Trump's legal team is now crafting a strategy on how to move forward as Biden is now leading or appears to have won in states that Trump carried back in 2016. Let's go to Kira Phillips right now. Kira.
Lindsay, I tell you what, it was very unlike President Trump today. He didn't even come out in front of the cameras at all, but that didn't mean he was going to be quiet either. He did proclaim victory on Twitter in Pennsylvania and Michigan, even though he hasn't officially won those states. Matter of fact, ABC News already called Michigan for Joe Biden, and Trump's legal team is getting plenty of face time, though, filing lawsuits to stop counting ballots. His son Eric, his legal advisors, former Florida AG Pam Bondi, also Rudy Giuliani. They held an event in Philly just a couple of hours ago, making accusations of fraud and claiming that campaign observers were being prevented from watching ballots being opened and counted. Take a listen.
Not a single Republican has been able to look at any one of these mail ballots. They could be from Mars, as far as we're concerned, or they could be from the Democratic National Committee. Joe Biden could have voted 50 times, as far as we know, or 5,000 times.
And then Lindsay, Pam Bondi came up to the mic after that, claiming poll watcher intimidation, and says they actually have video to prove it and will release it. But the director of the Brennan Center's Voting Rights and Elections program came forward calling the suit a nuisance and that it's just designed to distract Americans from the counting process. She says it's highly unlikely that the courts will even take this seriously. Lindsay?
And we just in the past half hour heard Pennsylvania's governor respond to some of those allegations. What is she saying? Or what is he saying? I'm sorry.
I know it's been a long 48 hours now. Tell me about it.
Bleary-eyed and all.
Oh, that's why I'm reading very slowly and I put the eye drops in.
All right, there
so, Governor Tom Wolf said that he would fight like hell. He came to the mics not long after that press conference and said that. And he said that he is going to make sure that every ballot is counted. And when he was asked about Giuliani's lawsuit specifically, he pointed out, Lindsay, that Philadelphia has been live streaming the counting of ballots. So any accusation of lack of transparency just doesn't hold water. And by the way, they are still counting ballots tonight as we speak, and they say they're not going to stop until the job is done. And neither are we.
We are not. No sleep. We persevere. We carry on.
Hashtag carry on.
Yes.
You got it, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Always good to talk to you. And now we go to Delaware, where ABC's Devin Dwyer is at the Biden campaign headquarters. Thanks so much for joining us, Devin. What's the mood there at this hour?
Well, hey, Lindsay, the Biden drive-in here in Wilmington didn't get its blockbuster moment last night, but make no mistake, the Biden campaign today was exuding confidence. Jen O'Malley, Dylan, the campaign manager, said, we have our next president of the United States. Now, they've stopped short of outright declaring that today. They were threading the needle of responsibility here in Wilmington. That said, we did just see just about an hour ago, the Biden campaign has officially unveiled their new transition website, buildbackbetter.com. So they are moving ahead, Lindsay, even before declaring victory just so far.
And we saw the Trump campaign launch a flurry of legal challenges late today. How concerned is the Biden team about those challenges? And is there any worry at this point about intervention by the Supreme Court and its conservative majority?
Well, for the most part, we've talked about those concerns about a possible Bush versus Gore 2.0 election meltdown. It seems a lot less likely tonight. In fact, almost unlikely given the math we have right now. That said, the Biden team is taking a very defensive posture. They say they're aware of the Trump campaign's legal lawsuits. They see them more than as nuisances more than anything else. They're prepared to combat them. But I got to tell you, Lindsay, as far as the Supreme Court tonight, there's no sign that the president is actually able to take anything directly to the Supreme Court. The Biden campaign doesn't seem particularly bothered with that, and the president hasn't even laid out a constitutional argument just yet in any of these states that he is contesting.
And even as Biden today stopped short of declaring victory with the electoral vote, we do know that he has unquestionably already made history in the popular vote. Is that right?
Oh, it's something we cannot lose sight of, Lindsay. I mean, even as that popular vote is still being tallied, we do know that Joe Biden will win the popular vote in this election. He's already tallied more than 70 million votes. That's more than 50% of all Americans who did vote yesterday or in the early days voted for Joe Biden. And think about it this way: more Americans cast a ballot for Joe Biden for president than any other president in American history. In fact, he surpassed the record, 69.5 million votes set by Barack Obama back in that historic election of 2008. So certainly a milestone for Joe Biden. But as we all know, the Electoral College is an entirely different story. So we're still waiting on that one, Lindsay.
And we heard from Joe Biden briefly late this afternoon, but how are he and Senator Harris spending their time during these hours of uncertainty? And has there been any contact yet with the president or his campaign?
Yeah, keeping a pretty low profile here in Wilmington. He's at his family home not far from here where we are. Aides today told me he is working the phones. He's calling his allies and supporters. He's calling Democrats who won yesterday in down ballot races. His campaign manager was asked today, has there been any contact with the Trump campaign or the president, either by Joe Biden or anyone else really over here at headquarters? And they answered flatly, no, Lindsay. So no contact just yet.
Devin Dwyer, thank you so much. And now let's check in on the congressional state of play. The Democrats were hoping to gain control of the U.S. Senate, but as of tonight, it appears that they'll fall short. A few seats still to be officially projected, but Democrats so far only flipping one seat while losing another that they had held. As expected, Democrats will keep control of the House, but they have lost at least 3 seats to Republican challengers. And in the 11 governor's races this election, only one has switched so far, with the Montana governor's office now held by a Republican. And for more now on the races in the post-election Congress, we bring in Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland. Thanks so much for joining us, Senator.
It's great to be with you.
So some pollsters, including our partners at 538, forecasted that the Democrats would likely flip the Senate this election. But with a few seats still to be officially projected, Democrats so far have only flipped 1 seat and lost 1 seat. What happened here?
Well, the good news, as you were reporting earlier, is that when every vote counts, I do believe that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. But there's no doubt that the path to a Senate majority has narrowed considerably. It's very much an uphill battle now. That is the disappointing news out of the night, because I believe we needed a Senate majority, Democratic majority, in order to pass a robust agenda with the incoming president of Biden-Harris administration. So if we ended up being stuck with Mitch McConnell as the majority leader in the Senate, it's going to be a much tougher slog. Vice President Biden today, of course, said that he wanted to reach across the aisle, be there for all Americans. I know he wants to do that, but Mitch McConnell's MO has been obstructionist in the past, and we'll have to see if there's any change. I'm skeptical.
In 2018, you were, of course, the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee when the Democrats faced an unfavorable map and lost ground. What lessons would you say that you've learned from 2018, and how was 2020 different?
Well, in 2018, of course, it was a midterm election, and we saw the House gain seats at that time. In the Senate races, we had a very difficult uphill battle. There were 26 Democrats up, about 8 Republicans. So I think we held our losses to a minimum. This year, of course, we hoped that because the numbers were flipped in many ways, that there would be more opportunities to pick up seats. And we see many of these close Senate races. Some are still being counted. But clearly, we did flip 2 seats, right? We flipped in Colorado and in Arizona, but we lost Alabama. And obviously, that's been a disappointment because we had hoped to pick up seats in North Carolina, Iowa, and Maine, and those are just a few of the other races that did not pan out as expected.
Yes, South Carolina.
South Carolina, another one, of course. Jamie Harrison ran a great campaign. So, look, I think we'll have to, look at these races very closely to determine what the lessons learned are. We saw that the presidential races were very tight in these states, and in most of the states, in fact, that were all of the ones that we're talking about, with the exception of Maine, Donald Trump won, and that helped carry the Republican Senate candidates in these races.
It appears that the president gained some ground this election with Black and Latino men. How do you explain that shift?
Yeah, look, I think this story's been a little bit exaggerated, especially when it comes to the black vote. I think, he's won a very small share of the black vote. And when it comes to the Latinx vote, I know he made gains in the Miami-Dade area. As you know, given the Cuban-American population there, that's sort of a distinct vote. But that's another area, Lindsay, that we'll have to be looking at very carefully, because the president's whole agenda has really, in many ways, been contrary to the idea of America as a country that's welcoming for immigrants. So we'll have to look at that, but I do think it's important not to overstate the case there.
Sure. And while I would imagine that you're hopeful, how likely do you think that come January, this new Congress can avoid some of the gridlock that we've seen in recent months?
Well, it does depend on Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell. We remember that he infamously said the same night that Barack Obama was elected president that his main objective was to make President Obama a one-term president. He fortunately did not succeed in achieving that goal, but he did obstruct from the very beginning and was never a partner to move the country forward. Joe Biden, like Barack Obama before him, has said that he wants to be a president for the entire country. We'll see whether Mitch McConnell is willing to, participate in trying to move the country forward. Again, if past his prologue, we can expect Mitch McConnell to simply be an obstructionist. We saw that with President Obama's judges and with President Obama's legislative initiatives.
Senator Van Hollen, we thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
And we turn now to the legal fights already underway in this razor-thin election. The Trump campaign is seeking a recount in Wisconsin and vowing legal battles to stop vote counts in key states. Earlier today, the president asked the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene in Pennsylvania. To break this all down for us, we bring in ABC News contributor and constitutional law professor Kate Shaw. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate. Hey, Lindsay, good to be with you. So let's start with Pennsylvania. Lawyers for Trump asked the Supreme Court to allow him to join a lawsuit challenging the mail ballot deadline extension in that state. Is this a challenge that he's likely to win? And if he does, what happens next? Well, there was no surprise that the Trump campaign tried to formally become a party to that suit. That case has actually been pending by the state GOP. Actually, has already been twice before the Supreme Court, so this is actually the third case it happened. And each time, the request has been to disqualify ballots that arrived between Tuesday, yesterday, and this Friday, which the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court has said are still valid. They just need to be mailed by Tuesday. So here we are. The Supreme Court turned away the first two attempts to have those ballots disqualified, but state officials in Pennsylvania have been segregating those ballots arriving after Tuesday because the Supreme Court seemed to leave the door open to reconsidering the question at the counting stage. So here you just have the Trump lawyers basically seeking to join the state GOP. So I presume they will be allowed to enter the lawsuit. But as to what the court actually does with it, it's hard to say. After votes have already said, which is that those ballots are valid, it is difficult for me to see the Supreme Court deciding to throw those ballots out. And whether it matters, of course, will come down to how close Pennsylvania is. It's likely only a few thousand ballots. It could be in the tens of thousands. And depending on how close Pennsylvania is, in the tens of thousands, it could make a difference. One thing to flag is that right now,
That's you. Bonjour, baby. Bonjour, baby. I say baby, Miss Baby.
Those numbers flip, and Joe Biden is likely
Bonjour,
to gain and may well pull
Bonjour,
ahead.
baby.
And if that's the case, I could imagine the Trump campaign switching positions and saying, if it ends up down in the count, wanting those late arriving ballots to come in because it might be someplace to pick up a few extra votes. But as for now, they're seeking to throw the ballots out.
Yes.
And, the Supreme Court now has a ninth member on board. Barrett wasn't yet on the court the first two times the court had this case. We don't really know what the outcome might look like. And we saw a barrage of legal activity late today. What other cases could potentially change the course of this election? Lindsay, it's hard for me to see any of the cases that have been either filed or just talked about today having a significant impact on the outcome. So you have the possibility of or a pledge of a recount request in Wisconsin. But of course, Biden looks to be up by about 20,000 in Wisconsin. And statewide recounts rarely, change an outcome like that. 20,000 is close, of course. But a statewide recount will sometimes flip a few hundred votes, maybe even a few thousand votes. But it's virtually impossible to change, to overcome a deficit of 20,000 votes. I think that's likely going to be the case in Michigan as well, if a recount is in fact sought there. And then you have these efforts on the margins to object to the way that ballots are being counted in Michigan and in Pennsylvania. But as you were just saying earlier with Kira, the Pennsylvania officials, including the governor, have been emphatic that they have followed the letter of the law. There actually have been live streams of these counting processes. So they have said they have offered complete transparency. And so it seems unlikely to me that those kinds of requests are going to get much traction. So it's definitely a scattershot approach, but from where we sit right now, it's hard for me to see any of these lawsuits actually changing the outcome in any of these states. And would you say that there's any chance that this election ultimately gets decided by the Supreme Court like it did in 2000 with Bush v. Gore?
It would have to be such a close, electoral vote, such that everything turned on the outcome in one state, like in Pennsylvania. And it is still possible. Of course, there are a handful of critical states that haven't yet been called. So it is not impossible that could happen, but I think the chances right now are significantly slimmer than they were, at this time yesterday, in that it looks as though Biden is closing, upon a more decisive win, such that a Supreme Court decision in an outcome-determinative state seems pretty unlikely. But the night is young, and obviously we've seen some twists and turns over just the past 24 hours, so I would never say never at this point.
All right, never say never, Kate Shaw. Thank you so much. And it is now just after 8 p.m. on the East Coast and 5 in the West at this hour. We are waiting for an update from Arizona and Georgia officials as the votes continue to pour in for those now must-win states for President Trump. Those states are critical for the president because former Vice President Joe Biden is now the projected winner in the state of Michigan, and ABC News can now characterize that he is the apparent winner in Wisconsin. We're using the word apparent because the race there is exceptionally close. Here is a national map showing the states that are still too close to call: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Let's go to our Tom Yamas, who is tracking the various paths to 270. Tom, where do things stand?
Lindsay, good evening. Great to be with you tonight. So let's dig into Pennsylvania right now. This is the major battleground that we're looking at right now. going to blow this up right here. We're having a little technical difficulty with this IFB, so I'm going to toss it away because I was hearing myself. All right, let's blow this up right here. So right now, President Trump has a lead, and it's 277,000 votes. You'd think that's a pretty commanding lead, and it is. But the problem for the president is that there's still about 1 million ballots that are still outstanding. So the question becomes, where are these ballots coming from? They're coming from all over the state. They're mail-in ballots. But the problem for the president is that they're coming from rural areas, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the suburbs. We do have a sense of the early vote, how it's trending the mail-in vote, and it's favoring Joe Biden 3-1. That's why Joe Biden and his campaign feels confident about Pennsylvania this hour. Let's go down south right now. So North Carolina, both campaigns are still trying to win North Carolina. President Trump is on top. He still has the lead there. Let's dig in a little deeper on Georgia because the margin here is razor thin. So at this hour, and I want to stress these numbers are changing minute by minute in some cases, there's about a 58,000 vote spread here. The problem for the president right now is that there are still 200,000 ballots that still need to be counted in Georgia. And again, it's the same problem.
And now
for
we
the
have to
president.
turn
It's
the
coming
TV
from an
on.
area that is conducive to Democrats, the greater Atlanta metro region. So we'll be monitoring that as well. All right, the state that moves west, there's two states we're watching now, Nevada and Arizona. In Nevada, Joe Biden has a lead, but it's a small lead, about 8,000 votes. The Trump campaign, though, feels they can do better here in Arizona. Now, there is a spread here. Maricopa County is the biggest county. This is where Phoenix is right now. And in the state, 15% of the vote is still out. There's a 90,000 vote spread between Joe Biden and President Trump. Joe Biden is on top in Arizona. But the president is confident about Arizona because there are still 400,000 ballots that have to be counted. A lot of them are from Maricopa County, and the Biden campaign saying we already have the lead here at the moment. So the question is, what are the paths to victory at this hour right now? For the purpose of this segment, Lindsay, we're going to give Alaska, even though we haven't projected that, to President Trump. So look at Joe Biden's number. If he indeed wins Arizona and Nevada, where he right now has the lead, look where he's at, 270. He becomes the next president of the United States. For Donald Trump, it becomes a little more difficult. Watch this. He has to win Pennsylvania. That's his number right up there. He has to win North Carolina. He has to win Georgia. And then he has to win one of these states, either Arizona or Nevada. And that's why it gets tougher for the president. His path to victory at this hour seems to be a little harder. Lindsay?
Tom Yamas, our thanks to you. President Trump behind closed doors in the White House today, planning his next steps after prematurely declaring last night, we already have won it, despite millions of votes still left to be counted. Today, his campaign is trying to take the battle over finishing the counts to the courts. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
Tonight, President Trump is huddled with his team has already filed a lawsuit in Michigan